The young Earth does not begin as a blue world. There are no forests, no oceans shining under sunlight, no clouds drifting over continents, no living thing waiting in silence. There is only heat, darkness, impact, and a surface that refuses to stay still. The planet glows like metal in a forge, wrapped in vapor and debris, turning beneath a young sun that is fainter than the sun known today, yet surrounded by a solar system still violent enough to tear worlds apart. Rock falls from space. Metal sinks inward. Lighter minerals churn upward. The ground is not really ground yet, but a restless skin of melt, cooling, breaking, and melting again. If a human eye could somehow witness it, there would be no horizon in the familiar sense, only firelight reflected through poisonous haze, a planet being assembled by catastrophe. Earth's story begins before Earth itself has a stable face. Around 4.6 billion years ago, the solar system forms from a collapsing cloud of gas and dust, with the infant sun gathering most of the mass at the centre, and a spinning disk of leftover material circling around it. Inside that disk, grains collide, cling, shatter, gather again, and become larger bodies. Pebbles become stones, stones become planetesimals, planetesimals become protoplanets, and each collision carries energy. The early Earth is not built gently. It is accumulated by impacts, by gravitational hunger, by the relentless sweep of matter into a growing sphere. The process is ordinary on the cosmic scale, and almost unimaginable on the human one, a planet made through violence, yet capable, much later, of becoming a home. At first, heat comes from many sources at once. Every impact drives energy into the forming body. Radioactive elements decay inside the young planet. Dense iron and nickel begin to sink toward the center, releasing more gravitational energy as Earth separates into core, mantle, and outer layers. This separation, called differentiation, is one of the quiet turning points of the entire story, though it happens in a world that is anything but quiet. The iron heart of Earth forms deep below, and with it begins the long foundation for a magnetic field, though the early details remain difficult to reconstruct. What survives in the record suggests that the planet's interior becomes organized early, but the surface is repeatedly erased, rewritten, and buried. The oldest chapters are almost gone, not because nothing happened, but because too much happened. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. This is not a story of a finished planet waiting for life. It is a story of a world that has to become survivable, one catastrophe at a time. The earliest formal chapter in Earth's geologic history is called the Hadean, a name borrowed from Hades, the ancient underworld, and although the name can sound theatrical, it captures something real about the uncertainty and severity of that time. The Hadean begins with Earth's formation about 4.54 billion years ago, and stretches toward the first more secure rock records of the Archean. Yet it is not simply a meaningless age of fire. Modern science has made the Hadean stranger and more nuanced than the old image of a permanent lava planet. There may be magma oceans, yes. There may be periods when much of the surface is molten, but there may also be intervals of crust, vapor, minerals, steam, impacts, and perhaps even early water cycling sooner than once assumed. Scholars still debate how quickly Earth cooled, how stable any early crust could have been, and how often impacts reset the surface. The evidence remains incomplete because the planet has spent billions of years destroying its own earliest evidence. One of the greatest events in this first act is the formation of the Moon. The leading explanation is the giant impact hypothesis: a Mars-sized body, often called Theia, collides with the young Earth, blasting material into orbit that eventually gathers into the Moon. The details remain debated, including the exact angle, speed, and composition of the impact, but the broad idea explains much of what is observed about Earth and Moon today. In the aftermath, Earth may be heated profoundly, perhaps returning to a global or near-global magma ocean. The Moon, newly formed and much closer than it is now, would loom enormous in the sky, raising powerful tides once oceans exist and helping shape the rhythm of Earth's rotation. This companion, born from impact, becomes part of the planet's long stability. But its birth is not gentle. It is a wound that becomes an inheritance. Around the young planet, the atmosphere is nothing like the breathable air of later ages. There is no oxygen-rich sky. The first gases may have been lost or stripped away, especially under the influence of the early sun and violent impacts. Later gases rise from Earth's interior through volcanic activity, water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur compounds, perhaps hydrogen, and other reactive molecules depending on conditions. The exact chemistry of the early atmosphere is one of the great puzzles because no bottle of Hadean air survives. Researchers infer it from rocks, isotopes, experiments, and models of planetary chemistry. What is clear is that this atmosphere is dense, hot, unstable, and chemically active. It is not a sky made for lungs. It is a laboratory wrapped around a burning world. That word, laboratory, matters. The early Earth is not just a battlefield of impacts. It is also a chemical engine, redox reactions, the transfer of electrons between elements and compounds, shape the possibilities of what can form. Carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrogen, iron, sulfur, hydrogen, and minerals interact across extreme environments. Magma oceans cool, volcanic gases rise, rock meets vapor, melt crystallizes, the atmosphere and interior exchange material. The boundary between geology and chemistry becomes blurred, and long before anything can be called alive, the planet is already creating gradients, surfaces, and reactions. These are not yet cells, not yet metabolism, not yet inheritance, but they are the stage on which such things may later become possible. The lesser-known surprise is that early Earth may not have needed to wait for a perfectly calm surface before important chemistry began. Violent worlds can also be productive worlds. Hydrothermal systems, volcanic islands, impact-heated basins, wet and dry cycles near mineral surfaces, and deep fractures in young crust may all create different chemical niches. Some environments destroy fragile molecules, others concentrate them. Some reactions are too chaotic. Others are guided by minerals like a hand on a river's current. No single explanation fully accounts for how lifeless chemistry crossed into biology, and that mystery lies ahead. But already, in the planet's fiery beginning, the pieces are gathering water, carbon, nitrogen, minerals, heat, electrical gradients, and time. Still, for a long while, Earth remains hostile beyond recognition. Bombardment continues as leftover debris from planet formation strikes the inner solar system. Some impacts may vaporize portions of crust or ocean if water is already present. Others may deliver materials, reshape basins, or stir the upper mantle. The old phrase, late heavy bombardment, has become more complicated as scientists debate whether there was a sharp spike in impacts or a longer decline from earlier chaos. The craters from that age are largely gone from Earth, erased by plate tectonics, erosion, burial, and recycling. But the Moon preserves a scarred memory of the same violent neighborhood. Earth's surface forgets. The moon remembers. Deep inside, however, the planet is becoming itself. The core continues to define Earth's interior architecture. The mantle convects slowly, though in the Hadean its patterns may differ from modern plate tectonics. The earliest crust may be thin, unstable, and repeatedly destroyed. But some mineral grains endure. Tiny zircon crystals from ancient rocks suggest that pieces of crust and perhaps liquid water existed very early, possibly within the first few 100 million years. These zircons are small enough to vanish on a fingertip, yet they carry messages from an almost lost planet. Their chemistry hints at cooling, crust formation, and water-rock interaction, though interpretation remains cautious. In a story dominated by fire, the first whispers of water arrive through crystals. This is where Earth's beginning becomes more mysterious than simple destruction. A planet can be molten and still begin to cool. It can be battered and still begin to organize. It can lose atmospheres and make new ones. It can be struck by a world-sized body and end up with a moon. It can be wrapped in toxic gases and still prepare the conditions for oceans. Nothing about the Hadean guarantees life. Many worlds remain barren. Venus and Mars, Earth's neighbouring planets, show that being rocky and near the sun is not enough. The early Earth has to follow a narrow and shifting path through heat, chemistry, gravity, and chance. By the end of this first great transformation, Earth is no longer just an accumulating ball of debris. It has a core, a mantle, an emerging crust, a violent sky, a nearby moon, and the raw chemical ingredients for stranger things to come. Its surface is still dangerous, perhaps frequently remade, but the direction of the story has changed. Fire has not vanished. Fire will return again and again in volcanoes, impacts, mass extinctions, and climate upheavals. But the planet is beginning to hold shape. The molten world is learning how to cool, and in the spaces between catastrophe, a new element of the story gathers above the rock and in the air-water waiting to fall. Water enters the story like a contradiction. It appears on a planet that has been hammered, melted, stripped, and reheated, a planet where stone glows and the sky is thick with vapour. Yet somewhere in those first hundreds of millions of years, the surface begins to cross a threshold. Heat still rises from below, impacts still arrive from above. Volcanoes keep breathing gases into the air, but the outer skin of Earth cools enough, at least in places and for intervals, for rock to harden and for vapour to condense. Clouds gather in a sky no human could survive beneath. Rain begins to fall through an atmosphere rich in carbon dioxide, nitrogen, steam, sulphur, and other gases, striking dark volcanic ground, hissing into fractures, pooling in basins, boiling away in some places and returning again from the sky. The first oceans are not peaceful blue mirrors. They are hot, mineral-rich, chemically restless, and born under alien skies. No one knows exactly when Earth's first long-lived oceans formed. The evidence remains incomplete because the oldest crust has almost entirely vanished into the planet's recycling machine. But tiny ancient zircons suggest that liquid water may have interacted with crust surprisingly early, perhaps more than 4.3 billion years ago. That does not mean a gentle water world already existed, and it does not mean the Hadean was secretly comfortable. It means that amid the violence, parts of Earth may have cooled enough for water rock chemistry to begin. The image is not one of instant calm, but of a world flickering between extremes, molten landscapes, cooling crust, steam atmospheres, rainstorms, impact heat, and basins where water gathers before being disturbed again. Where the water came from remains one of the deep questions of planetary history. Some of it may have been released from Earth's interior as volcanic gases cooled and condensed. Some may have arrived in water-rich asteroids and other small bodies that struck the planet during and after its formation. Comets were once imagined as major suppliers, and they may have contributed, but their chemistry does not always match Earth's water neatly. Most likely, Earth's oceans are not the gift of a single event. They are an inheritance assembled from multiple sources minerals that carried hydrogen and oxygen into the forming planet, gases that escaped from molten rock, and impacts that delivered volatile compounds from colder regions of the young solar system. Scholars still debate the proportions, but the larger point is clear. Earth does not simply receive an ocean. It earns one through geology, chemistry, and bombardment. The sky above those first seas would feel profoundly unfamiliar. Without free oxygen, there is no modern blue atmosphere in the usual sense, no protective oxygen ozone system like the one later life depends upon. The sun is younger and fainter, yet Earth does not freeze solid because greenhouse gases trap heat. Carbon dioxide likely plays a major role. Methane may become important later, especially once microbial life begins producing it, but even before biology takes over. The atmosphere is chemically active. The young sun also sends out energetic radiation and solar wind. Lightning cuts through dense clouds. Volcanic plumes spread sulfur and ash. The air is not merely a backdrop, it is a reacting layer of the planet, connected to oceans, crust, and interior. Beneath that sky, the early ocean is not just water, it is a vast solvent carrying iron, silica, salts, dissolved gases, and compounds washed from newborn rock. Rivers, if they exist in familiar form, are not cutting through green continents, because there are no forests, no soils filled with roots, no animals moving along banks. Instead, water runs over bare volcanic terrain and primitive crust, pulling elements into basins. Hydrothermal systems thread through the seafloor where seawater sinks into cracks, heats near magma, reacts with minerals, and rises again carrying dissolved metals and reduced chemical compounds. These systems are not just dramatic scenery. They create gradients hot and cold, acidic and alkaline, oxidized and reduced, mineral-rich and mineral-poor. Life does not yet have to exist for the planet to begin making chemical differences that life could later exploit. This is one of the quieter wonders of early Earth. A lifeless planet can still be full of structure. In deep fractures and seafloor vents, minerals can behave like tiny electrical landscapes. Iron and sulfur compounds can pass electrons. Rock surfaces can concentrate molecules that would otherwise drift too thinly through open water. Pores in mineral deposits can create natural compartments, not cells, but small spaces where chemistry is not immediately lost to the whole ocean. In pools near volcanic land, wet and dry cycles may concentrate organic molecules. In impact-heated regions, energy can destroy, but it can also generate new reactions. No single environment has won the argument as the birthplace of life. The evidence remains incomplete, and each proposed setting has strengths and problems. Yet the early Earth offers many laboratories at once, and that may be part of the answer. Even nitrogen, so ordinary in the modern atmosphere, presents a problem. Life needs usable nitrogen to build amino acids, nucleotides, and many other molecules. But atmospheric nitrogen gas is stubbornly inert. It does not easily join chemical reactions without help. Before biology evolves the enzymes that later fix nitrogen so efficiently, early Earth must rely on abiotic processes: lightning, volcanic chemistry, impacts, photochemical reactions, and mineral pathways that can turn nitrogen into more accessible forms. This detail is easy to miss because water and carbon usually dominate origin of life stories, but a planet can have oceans and organic carbon and still struggle to feed early chemistry if essential elements are locked away. The first biospheres, if they exist this early, would depend on geochemical generosity. Impacts continue to complicate everything. Some are small enough to leave scars, heat regions, and deliver material. Others are large enough to boil oceans locally or globally, melt crust, and reset surface chemistry. The old view pictured early Earth as a place where life could not begin until bombardment fully subsided. Modern thinking is more cautious. It is possible that life emerged after the worst impacts declined. It is also possible that prebiotic chemistry was interrupted, began again, and survived in protected environments such as deep crustal systems or hydrothermal refuges. What survives in the record does not allow a simple answer. Earth's beginning is not a clean laboratory experiment with a single start date. It is a planet-scale struggle between destruction and persistence. As oceans spread, the moon pulls at them from much closer than today. Tides may be stronger, days are shorter because Earth rotates faster. Coastlines, if stable coastlines exist, shift under a larger lunar presence. The rhythm of water moving over rock could create cycles of concentration and dilution, exposure and immersion. Later life will be deeply shaped by cycles day and night, tides, seasons, climate swings. In this early age, before genes and cells are securely visible in the record, the planet is already learning rhythm. The moon, born from impact, becomes a metronome over the first seas. The continents of this time are not continents as humans know them. There may be island arcs, proto-continental fragments, volcanic plateaus, and early crustal blocks, but the great familiar land masses lie far in the future. Modern plate tectonics may not yet operate in its present form. Some researchers imagine a hotter, more mobile lid. Others see early forms of subduction beginning sooner. The debate matters because tectonics governs how carbon moves between atmosphere, ocean, crust, and mantle. It affects climate stability, nutrient supply, volcanism, and the renewal of chemical environments. Earth's habitability is not just a matter of being the right distance from the sun. It depends on a whole planetary engine working unevenly through time. By the time this ocean-covered, impact-scarred Earth settles into the next great phase, it is still nothing like the living world. There is no grass, no reef, no fish, no whisper of wings, no animal eye watching waves move beneath the moon. But the stage has changed completely from the molten beginning. Fire has made rock. Rock has met water. Water has drawn chemistry out of stone. The sky has become a greenhouse and a shield, imperfect but necessary. The ocean has become a restless archive of elements. Somewhere in that vastness, in a vent, a pool, a mineral pore, a shoreline, or a setting, science has not yet imagined clearly. Chemistry begins to approach a dangerous boundary. On one side is matter reacting. On the other side is matter remembering. Somewhere after the oceans gather and the planet's surface becomes a place of repeating chemistry, Earth crosses the strangest threshold in its history. It is not marked by a footprint, a skeleton, a shell, or a leaf pressed into stone. There is no first creature stepping into view. There is no obvious fossil that says, with perfect certainty, that here life begins. Instead, the beginning hides in traces so faint that they can resemble geology, in carbon locked inside ancient minerals, in microscopic textures, in chemical patterns, in rocks folded and heated until their original message becomes blurred. The first life does not arrive as an animal or a plant or even a recognizable microbe under ordinary imagination. It appears, if that word can be used, as a shadow at the edge of chemistry. This is why the origin of life remains one of the deepest mysteries in science. Earth preserves no clean birth certificate for biology. The earliest crust has mostly been destroyed, recycled into the mantle, altered by heat, squeezed by pressure, dissolved by fluids, and transformed beyond easy reading. The record is not simply incomplete, it is wounded. When scientists search for the earliest life, they are not reading a fresh page. They are trying to recover a sentence from ashes, from rocks that have survived billions of years of planetary change. What survives in the record suggests that life is ancient, perhaps very ancient, but the exact pathway from non-living chemistry to living systems remains debated. Still, the clues are powerful. By the Archean Eon, which begins around 4 billion years ago, Earth is no longer only a Hadean world of formation and bombardment. It has oceans, crust, a young atmosphere, and active chemistry moving through the interfaces between water and rock. In this world, the first living systems may have been microscopic, single-celled, and dependent on chemical energy rather than sunlight. They may have lived around hydrothermal vents, in warm pools, inside porous mineral structures, beneath sediments, or in fractured crust where water carried dissolved gases and metals through stone. No single explanation fully accounts for the origin, and different environments may have contributed different steps. The beginning may not have been one place, but a network of chemical experiments spread across a restless planet. The difficulty is that life is not defined by one feature alone. A flame consumes fuel and grows, but it is not alive. A crystal can make copies of its structure, but it is not alive in the biological sense. A chemical cycle can repeat, but repetition alone is not life. Living systems use energy, maintain boundaries, build and repair themselves, store information, and pass that information forward with variation. Somehow, early Earth chemistry had to move toward all of these traits together, or at least towards a system where they could begin supporting one another. A membrane without inheritance is not enough. A molecule that carries information without metabolism is not enough. A metabolic cycle without a stable compartment may disperse into the ocean. The first living shadows must have combined memory, chemistry, and boundary in a way that could endure. One of the most important figures in this story is not the first organism, but the last universal common ancestor, often called LUCA. LUCA is easy to misunderstand. It is not necessarily the first life. It is not a single lonely cell sitting at the beginning of biology like the first page of a book. It is the ancestor from which all known life today descends: bacteria, archaea, plants, animals, fungi, and humans. Recent work suggests LUCA may have lived astonishingly early, perhaps around 4.2 billion years ago, and may already have possessed a surprisingly complex genetic and metabolic toolkit. If that is correct, then life's origin must have begun even earlier, because Luca would already represent a survivor within a broader and older world of microbial evolution. Scholars still debate the timing and details, but the implication is profound. By the time Earth is still young, life may already have learned to persist. Imagine that world not as empty water, but as a planet quietly becoming microbial. There are no forests to darken the land, no animals to stir the seabed, no shells accumulating in pale layers. Yet the ocean may already contain communities too small to see, feeding on hydrogen, carbon dioxide, sulfur, iron, methane, or other chemical sources. Some live perhaps in darkness, where sunlight never reaches, drawing energy from reactions between seawater and rock. Others may occupy shallow waters where sunlight, minerals, and cycles of wetting and drying create different opportunities. Their lives are not lives in the familiar dramatic sense. They do not hunt or flee or call out, but they transform energy. They divide. They carry information. They make mistakes in copying, and some mistakes survive. Evolution begins not with grandeur, but with error. The early biosphere, if it can be called that, would have been fragile in one sense and astonishingly resilient in another. A single cell is easily destroyed, but a population spread across many environments can survive events that erase entire habitats. Impacts may boil surface waters in places, but deep crustal environments could remain protected. Volcanic eruptions may poison one basin while feeding another with chemical energy. Hydrothermal vents may collapse and reform. Sediments bury some communities and expose others. Life, once established, does not need the whole planet to be gentle. It needs refuges, energy, raw materials, and time. The early Earth offers danger everywhere, but it also offers hiding places. The traces of these ancient organisms are difficult to recognize because they rarely leave bodies. Soft cells decay. Molecular remains are altered. Rock textures can imitate biology. Carbon isotope ratios can suggest life because living organisms often prefer lighter carbon. But non-biological processes can sometimes complicate the signal. Structures interpreted as microbial mats or stromatolites can be persuasive in some rocks and controversial in others. Chemical evidence from rocks older than 3 billion years offers tantalizing signs that biological processes may have been active, yet each claim must survive careful testing. The older the evidence, the more cautious the interpretation must be. Deep time does not give up its secrets cheaply. One surprising part of the story is that early life may have helped build its own planet almost from the beginning. Even simple microbes do not merely exist within an environment. They alter it. They change local chemistry. They trap sediments. They produce waste. They draw down some compounds and release others. They create gradients that other microbes can exploit. A community of microbes can become an ecosystem long before the world has anything that looks like a plant or animal. If Luca truly lived in a complex microbial setting, then the first biosphere was not a thin smear of barely surviving cells. It may have been a hidden web of chemical exchange, with different organisms already depending on one another in ways only partly visible through modern genetic reconstruction. There is also a strange humility in this earliest life. The organisms that shape the future of Earth are invisible to the naked eye. They have no monuments, no bones, no faces, no drama that can be easily painted. Yet they carry the most important revolution the planet has ever known. Before them, Earth is active but not alive. After them, Earth becomes a planet where geology and biology are entangled forever. Weathering, ocean chemistry, atmosphere, climate, mineral formation, and the deep carbon cycle will increasingly be influenced by living metabolism. Life begins as something small enough to vanish in a drop of water, then slowly becomes a planetary force. For hundreds of millions of years, perhaps longer, this is Earth's living world, microbial, oceanic, chemical, and mostly hidden. The continents remain barren rock. The sky remains without breathable oxygen. The seas may be rich in dissolved iron, giving some waters a chemistry unlike modern oceans. Sunlight falls across waves that no animal sees. Tides move under the pull of a closer moon. Volcanoes keep feeding the air and sea. Beneath it all, cells divide in silence, carrying forward a code that will, across impossible spans of time, lead to forests, insects, dinosaurs, whales, and human beings trying to understand the darkness from which they came. But first, these tiny lives will do something more dangerous than survive. They will begin to change the air. The first life does not transform Earth by growing large. It transforms Earth by changing what the planet breathes. For an immense span of time, the living world remains microscopic, spread through seas, sediments, mineral surfaces, and perhaps warm, shallow basins where sunlight reaches through the water. These organisms leave no forests and no bones. They build no reefs in the later familiar sense. Yet some of them learn a trick so consequential that the planet will never recover from it. They begin using sunlight to tear electrons from water, capturing energy and releasing a waste gas into the world around them. That waste gas is oxygen, and for early Earth, oxygen is not a gift, it is a chemical threat. To modern ears, oxygen sounds like life itself. It fills lungs, feeds fires, lets large animals move, and makes complex bodies easier to sustain. But this is a later relationship. On the early Earth, most life evolves in a world where free oxygen is almost absent. Microbes build their metabolisms around other chemical possibilities: hydrogen, sulfur, iron, methane, carbon dioxide, and the many reactions available in oxygen-poor environments. For them, oxygen can be dangerous because it is reactive. It steals electrons, it damages molecules, it breaks delicate systems that evolved without defenses against it. The rise of oxygen is sometimes described as a great oxygenation, but from the viewpoint of older anaerobic life, it may have been more like a planetary poisoning, slow at first, then impossible to escape. The organisms most closely associated with this revolution are cyanobacteria and their relatives, microbial photosynthesizers capable of oxygenic photosynthesis. They are not plants, though plants will later inherit photosynthesis through a deep symbiotic history. They are bacteria, small and ancient, and they do not set out to change the world. Evolution has no plan. A metabolic pathway that works locally, that provides energy to a cell in sunlit water, can spread if it gives an advantage. The oxygen it releases is waste, something expelled into seawater. For a long time, that oxygen does not accumulate in the atmosphere because Earth has too many chemical sinks waiting for it. The planet is full of substances ready to react. One of the greatest sinks is iron dissolved in the oceans. In oxygen-poor seawater, iron can remain in solution in forms that would not persist in modern oxygenated oceans. When oxygen enters that water, it reacts with iron and forms iron oxides, minerals that settle out and build layered deposits. Over time, these help create banded iron formations, some of the most visually striking rocks on Earth, alternating layers of iron-rich minerals and silica, red, black, silver, and dark grey. Recording an ocean chemistry unlike anything humans know, these rocks are not just pretty geological relics. They are part of the archive of oxygen's first long struggle. Before oxygen can fill the air, it has to rust the seas. The timing is complex. Oxygenic photosynthesis may have evolved before oxygen rose permanently in the atmosphere. There may have been earlier whiffs of oxygen, brief or localized episodes where oxygen appeared and then faded again. Chemical evidence in ancient rocks suggests that Earth did not simply flip from an anoxic planet to an oxygen-rich one overnight. Instead, oxygen production, volcanic gases, ocean chemistry, burial of organic carbon, methane cycling. and crustal reactions all interacted across hundreds of millions of years. Scholars still debate exactly when oxygenic photosynthesis began and how long oxygen remained trapped in local environments before it transformed the atmosphere. What survives in the record suggests a long fuse, not a sudden explosion. Around 2.45 billion years ago, give or take the uncertainties that always come with deep time, the atmosphere crosses a major threshold. This is the Great Oxidation Event, one of the most important turning points in Earth history. Oxygen begins to accumulate as a persistent atmospheric gas. It is still far below modern levels, but its presence becomes geologically undeniable. Certain minerals that can survive transport only under oxygen-poor conditions become rare in river deposits. Sulfur isotopes change in ways that reveal a different atmospheric chemistry. The planet's surface environment is reorganized. Earth is still microbial, still alien, still without animals, but it has entered a new chemical age. The consequences are enormous. Oxygen reacts with methane, a powerful greenhouse gas that may have helped keep the young Earth warm under a fainter sun. If oxygen reduces atmospheric methane, the planet can cool. This cooling may have contributed to severe glaciations in the Paleoproterozoic, sometimes associated with the Huronian glaciations, when ice spreads widely across parts of the world. The exact relationship between oxygen rise, methane decline, carbon dioxide, volcanic outgassing, and ice remains debated. But the broad connection is compelling microbes alter the atmosphere, and the atmosphere alters climate. Life, which began as a hidden chemical presence, now reaches upward into the sky and outward into the fate of oceans and ice. There is a lesser-known irony here. Oxygen is destructive, but it also opens new energetic possibilities. Aerobic respiration, the use of oxygen to extract energy from organic molecules, can yield far more usable energy than many anaerobic pathways. At first, oxygen is a hazard that organisms must avoid or defend against. Over time, some lineages evolve ways to tolerate it, then exploit it. This pattern appears again and again in Earth history. A crisis becomes an opportunity. But not for everyone. Many older microbial worlds likely shrink into refuges where oxygen does not reach easily sediments. Deep waters, hydrothermal systems, buried environments, and other anoxic pockets. They do not vanish entirely. Even today, oxygen-poor microbial worlds persist in mud, guts, deep rock, and stagnant basins. The ancient Earth is not gone. Pieces of it are hidden inside the modern one. This oxygen revolution also changes minerals. Earth's surface begins forming new kinds of oxidized compounds. Weathering changes. Oceans change. The colors of landscapes eventually change. Red beds, iron-stained sediments formed under oxygenated conditions, become more common later, marking a world where exposed land can rust. The planet's chemistry becomes more varied because oxygen is a restless sculptor. It turns invisible gases into acids, metals into oxides, and buried organic matter into part of the long carbon cycle. It is both corrosive and creative. Without it, large complex life as humans know it would be unlikely. With it, older ways of life are forced into retreat. Yet even after the Great Oxidation Event, Earth is not suddenly modern. Oxygen levels remain unstable and comparatively low for vast stretches of time. The Proterozoic eon, following the Archean, is sometimes imagined as a dull middle age between microbial beginnings and animal life. But that is misleading. It is a long era of hidden preparation, chemical tension, and biological experiment. Oceans may have oxygenated surface waters but oxygen-poor depths. Sulfur chemistry becomes important. Microbial mats spread in shallow environments. Stromatolites, layered structures built by microbial communities, become common in many ancient seas, rising like low, domed records of sunlight, sediment, and bacterial life. They're not dramatic in the way dinosaurs are dramatic, but they are among the planet's great builders. The oxygen story reveals something essential about Earth. Life does not merely adapt to the planet. Life changes the planet, and then must adapt to the changes it has made. Cyanobacteria release oxygen as waste, and that waste becomes a global force. It rusts oceans, alters the atmosphere, threatens older metabolisms, cools climate, transforms minerals, and lays the foundation for future complexity. No single explanation fully accounts for every stage of this transition, and the evidence remains incomplete, especially for the earliest oxygen production. But the direction is unmistakable. The world of fire and water has become a world where biology can reshape air itself. By the time oxygen becomes a permanent part of the atmosphere, Earth has crossed a boundary as important as the formation of oceans. The planet is still ruled by microbes. It is still lonely in any human sense. There are no eyes in the sea, no feet on land, no voices under the sky. But the sky is changing because living things have changed it. And as oxygen rises, methane fades, greenhouse warmth weakens, and the balance of climate trembles. The next great face Earth shows may not be fire at all, but a whiteness spreading toward the equator, a frozen silence that suggests life's greatest byproduct may have helped push the planet toward ice. Ice does not arrive on Earth as a quiet decoration. It arrives as a planetary warning. After oxygen begins to change the atmosphere, the balance of warmth becomes more fragile. Methane, once able to help trap heat beneath a fainter young sun, is vulnerable in an oxygen-bearing sky. Carbon dioxide still matters, volcanic gases still rise, oceans still exchange heat with air, but the old greenhouse mixture is no longer the same. The planet that has survived fire, bombardment, and boiling chemistry now faces a different kind of danger reflection. Snow and ice are bright. They throw sunlight back into space. When ice spreads far enough, it cools the world further, and that cooling allows more ice to spread. A planet can begin to lock itself inside its own whiteness. The first major glaciations linked to this changing atmosphere occurred deep in the Paleoproterozoic, long before animals, long before plants, long before anything like a familiar landscape. These ancient ice ages are difficult to reconstruct because the continents have shifted. Rocks have been altered, and the evidence has been broken into fragments across modern cratons. Yet the signs are there: glacial deposits in rocks more than 2 billion years old. Sediments that suggest ice once moved over land or into marine basins, and chemical signals of a climate system under stress. The relationship between oxygen, methane, carbon dioxide, and ice remains debated, but the broad outline is haunting. Microbes change the air changes the climate tests the endurance of life. To picture such a world, it helps to remove almost everything familiar. There are no pine forests under snow, no mammoths crossing frozen plains, no animals breathing steam into cold air. The continents are bare rock and sediment. The seas are microbial. The atmosphere contains oxygen, but far less than today. The sun is dimmer than the modern sun, and the planet depends on greenhouse gases to remain warm enough for liquid water. When that balance shifts, ice can spread across regions that seem impossible by modern intuition. Glaciers grind over barren ground. Sea ice thickens. Storms move across an almost lifeless surface. Under the ice, however, the story is not over. Microbes persist where chemistry still offers energy, where liquid water survives beneath ice, within sediments, near hydrothermal systems, or in pockets of brine. Life has no cities to lose, no forests to bury, but it has refuges. Much later, in the Neo-Proterozoic era, Earth may pass into even more extreme glaciations, the famous Snowball Earth episodes of the Cryogenian period. These events, often associated with the Sturtian and Marinoan glaciations, are among the most dramatic climate states proposed for any habitable planet. The hypothesis suggests that ice may have reached low latitudes, perhaps even close to the equator, covering oceans with thick ice and turning Earth into a world that from space might have looked pale, silent, and almost dead. But the word snowball can mislead if used too simply. Scholars still debate how complete the ice cover was. Some models imagine a hard snowball with oceans sealed beneath global ice. Others allow thinner ice, open water belts, seasonal cracks, or slushy equatorial refuges. The evidence is strong that these were extraordinary glaciations. The exact shape of the frozen Earth remains uncertain. The cause of Snowball Earth is not a single easy answer. Continental positions matter, weathering matters, volcanism matters, the carbon cycle matters. When continents sit in tropical latitudes, warm rain and exposed rock can accelerate chemical weathering, pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and weakening the greenhouse effect. If carbon dioxide falls low enough, ice can begin spreading. Once ice expands, the albedo feedback takes over, reflecting more sunlight and pushing the planet toward deeper cold. Some studies even explore whether a large impact could trigger such a transition under the right conditions, throwing dust and aerosols into the atmosphere or disturbing climate enough to tip a vulnerable planet. That idea is fascinating, but it should remain where the evidence places it a model-based possibility, not a settled explanation. No single trigger fully accounts for every snowball episode. The frozen Earth, if it truly became nearly global, creates one of the strangest survival problems in the history of life. Photosynthetic microbes need light. Many ecosystems need exchange between ocean and atmosphere. Nutrients must circulate. If thick ice seals the ocean for millions of years, how does life endure? The answer may lie in imperfection. Even a severe Snowball Earth may contain cracks, thin ice regions, melt ponds, volcanic hotspots, hydrothermal vents, subglacial lakes, and areas where dust and dark debris absorb sunlight. Near volcanoes, heat can create local melt. At the seafloor, hydrothermal systems continue because Earth's interior does not freeze. Microbial life is not easily impressed by hardship. It can persist in darkness, in cold, in salt, in chemical gradients that would seem unlivable to larger organisms. The biosphere shrinks perhaps, changes perhaps, but it does not disappear. One lesser-known detail makes these ice ages even more eerie while the surface is frozen. Volcanoes keep exhaling. Plate tectonics and mantle processes do not stop because the sky is cold. Carbon dioxide continues to enter the atmosphere from volcanic outgassing. But if the continents are buried under ice, chemical weathering slows dramatically. The usual long-term mechanism that removes carbon dioxide from air is weakened. So carbon dioxide accumulates over immense spans of time, slowly thickening the greenhouse blanket above a frozen world. The same gas that cannot prevent the descent into ice eventually becomes the key to escape. Earth waits under ice while its own volcanoes load the atmosphere with the heat needed to melt it. The end of a snowball Earth may be as violent in its own way as the beginning. Once warming crosses a threshold, melting accelerates. Dark water and exposed rock absorb more sunlight than ice, amplifying the thaw. Glaciers retreat, seas open. Weathering resumes on a scale that may be intense and chemically dramatic because carbon dioxide levels are high. Rain falling through a CO2-rich atmosphere can become acidic, attacking newly exposed rock and carrying ions into the ocean. Unusual carbonate layers, often called cap carbonates, appear above some glacial deposits and may record the rapid chemical aftermath of these global or near-global thaws. The world does not simply return to normal, it wakes into a greenhouse after a long freeze, and the oceans receive a pulse of weathered material from continents that have been locked away. For life, these cycles of ice and release may be destructive, but they may also be creative. Severe glaciations can isolate populations, alter nutrient supplies, reshape oceans, and force organisms into refuges where evolution follows unusual paths. After the cryogenian ice ages, Earth moves toward the Ediacaran period, when larger and more complex organisms begin appearing in the fossil record. It would be too simple to say Snowball Earth directly caused animal life. The evidence does not allow such a neat conclusion, but the timing is suggestive. Ice, oxygen, nutrients, ocean chemistry, and biological innovation all seem to be part of the same broad transformation. The planet's greatest freezes may have helped prepare the stage for bodies that could be seen. The frozen chapters show Earth as something more unstable than the comforting image of a life-friendly planet. Habitability is not a permanent condition handed down at formation. It is negotiated again and again between sunlight, rock, gas, ocean, ice, and life. The same microbes that help oxygenate the air may contribute indirectly to cooling. The same volcanoes that bury landscapes in lava may later rescue the planet from snow and ice. The same carbon cycle that stabilizes climate over long time can also fail, overshoot, and recover. Earth survives not because it never approaches disaster, but because its systems keep finding ways out, though never without cost. By the end of these great ice ages, the world is still dominated by microbes, but it is no longer the same microbial Earth as before. The atmosphere has changed, the oceans have changed, continents have been scraped, drowned, exposed, and chemically reset. Life has endured darkness, cold, isolation, and planetary stress. In the long thaw that follows, Earth carries both scars and possibilities. The ice retreats, the seas open, and in the oxygen-shadowed waters of the later Proterozoic, cells begin taking a path that will make life larger, stranger, and more intimate. The next revolution will not begin with a global freeze or a sky full of poison, but with one cell entering another and both somehow surviving. After the ice retreats and the oceans open again, Earth does not immediately bloom into animals. The thawed planet is still mostly a microbial world, and for a long time its greatest changes happen below the threshold of sight. To a human observer, the seas might still seem empty, the continents still barren, the skies still quiet. Yet inside the microscopic world, life begins rearranging itself in ways as dramatic as any asteroid strike or global freeze. The next revolution is not written across continents in glaciers or lava. It happens inside cells. One living thing enters another, and instead of being destroyed, it stays. From that improbable intimacy comes a new kind of life. For billions of years, life has existed mostly as bacteria and archaea, small cells without nuclei, without the internal architecture familiar from plants, animals, fungi, and algae. These simple-looking organisms are not primitive in the sense of being weak or unsuccessful. They are masters of chemistry. They can live in boiling vents, deep sediments, salty basins, oxygen-poor mud, bright microbial mats, and places where larger life would fail almost immediately. They built Earth's oxygen atmosphere. They altered oceans. They endured impact, ice, heat, darkness, and chemical upheaval. But most of them remain small because their internal organization limits how much complexity can be packed into a cell. A bacterium can be astonishingly sophisticated, but it does not usually build the kind of internal machinery that later allows large bodies, specialized tissues, and nervous systems. Eukaryotic cells change that. These are the cells that eventually give rise to every visible form of complex life. Each eukaryotic cell contains internal compartments, including a nucleus where genetic material is housed, and organelles that divide tasks within the cell. It has a cytoskeleton, a flexible internal scaffold that allows shape, movement, transport, and division in more elaborate ways. It can grow larger than most bacteria without losing control of its inner chemistry. It can engulf material. It can form partnerships inside itself. If microbial life before eukaryotes is like a world of brilliant small workshops, the eukaryotic cell is more like a city with districts, roads, power stations, storage rooms, gates, and archives. The most famous of those internal power stations are mitochondria. Their origin is one of the great insights of modern biology. Mitochondria were once free-living bacteria, or close relatives of free-living bacteria, that entered into a relationship with another cell. Exactly how it began remains debated. Perhaps one cell engulfed another and failed to digest it. Perhaps the partnership started through metabolic exchange, with one organism producing compounds the other could use. Perhaps the host cell was archaeal in nature, related in some deep way to lineages that modern researchers compare with groups such as Asgard Archaea. The details remain incomplete, but the outcome is clear. A bacterium became an organelle. A former outsider became part of the self. This is endosymbiosis, and it changes life's possibilities. Mitochondria help cells use oxygen to produce energy efficiently. That does not mean eukaryotes appear only because oxygen rises, or that oxygen alone explains complexity. The relationship is more tangled. Oxygen levels in the Proterozoic are lower and more variable than today. Many environments remain oxygen poor. Some eukaryotes later adapt to low oxygen settings and even modify or reduce their mitochondria into structures such as hydrogenosomes or mitosomes. But in the long run, mitochondria provide energetic advantages that make larger cells and more complex internal systems easier to sustain. A cell with many mitochondria has many localized sources of usable energy. It can afford a bigger genome, more internal traffic, more regulation, more experimentation. One lesser-known clue to this ancient merger still exists inside modern cells. Mitochondria carry their own DNA, reduced and altered after billions of years, but still a trace of their bacterial ancestry. They divide in ways that echo bacterial division. They have membranes that preserve hints of the old boundary between guest and host. Every breath taken by an animal, every muscle contraction, every quiet thought in a human brain depends on these descendants of ancient microbes living inside other cells. The deep past is not only in fossils, it is inside the body, in structures inherited from a union so old that no rock preserves the first moment. The nucleus is another mystery. Unlike mitochondria, its origin is harder to reconstruct. Some hypotheses suggest the nuclear membrane formed from enfolded cell membranes, Others propose viral contributions, symbiotic events, or gradual internal compartmentalization in an archaeal host. No single explanation fully accounts for every feature. What matters for the story of Earth is that the nucleus changes how genetic information is managed. DNA can be separated from the busy chemistry of the rest of the cell. Gene expression can be regulated in more elaborate ways. Introns, chromosomes, RNA processing, and cellular control systems become part of the eukaryotic world. This is not visible drama, but it is the groundwork for later drama. Bodies begin as regulation. Sexual reproduction also becomes important, though its early history is difficult to trace. Microbes exchange genes in many ways, but eukaryotic sex, with meiosis and the mixing of genetic material between cells, creates new evolutionary possibilities. It can bring together useful mutations, purge harmful ones, and generate variation in changing environments. Sex is costly and complicated, which is precisely why its persistence is so interesting. Scholars still debate how it evolved and why it became so widespread among eukaryotes. But once it is established, life has another tool for exploring form, function, and adaptation. Evolution gains a new rhythm, not just copying and mutation, but recombination. For much of the Proterozoic, these innovations unfold slowly. This long interval is sometimes called the boring billion, a phrase that sounds dismissive and is only partly fair. It refers to a stretch when climate, oxygen, and biological change may appear relatively stable compared with the dramatic events before and after. But boring is a dangerous word in deep time. Beneath the calm surface, eukaryotes diversify. Oceans contain algae and other protists. Microbial mats continue shaping shallow environments. Predation at the microscopic level may become more important as larger cells engulf smaller ones. Defensive structures, movement, chemical signaling, and ecological relationships grow more complex. The world is still small, but it is no longer simple. Multicellularity appears not as one invention but many. Bacteria can form colonies and filaments. Algae evolve multicellular forms. Fungi, plants, and animals will later follow separate routes. The key step is not merely cells sticking together. Cells must cooperate, communicate, specialize, and sometimes give up their own direct reproduction for the success of the larger body. That is a profound evolutionary bargain. A cluster of identical cells is one thing. A body with different tissues is another. Early multicellular life likely begins with simple associations, sheets, filaments, balls, and colonies in which some cells begin doing different jobs. The evidence remains incomplete because soft bodies fossilize poorly, and many early forms leave only chemical traces or ambiguous impressions. But what survives in the record suggests that life is learning how to become visible. Oxygen plays a role, but again, not in a simple way. Larger bodies benefit from oxygen because diffusion and energy demands become harder to manage as size increases. Yet oxygen levels fluctuate, and some complex cells thrive in low oxygen conditions. Nutrients matter too, especially phosphorus, nitrogen, iron, and trace metals. Ocean chemistry can either support or restrict biological expansion. Continental weathering feeds the seas, tectonics rearranges basins, ice ages reset nutrient cycles. Life's complexity depends on the whole Earth system, not on a single magic ingredient. The planet that once forged oceans from steam and rock now provides a shifting chemical stage for cells that carry internal worlds. By the late Proterozoic, Earth has become quietly expectant. There are still no dinosaurs, No forests, no insects, no fish, no land animals. But the ingredients for large life are assembling oxygen in greater amounts than before. Eukaryotic cells with internal power, genetic systems capable of variation, multicellular experiments, and ecological interactions that reward movement, defense, feeding, and cooperation. The old microbial planet does not disappear. It remains the foundation. But above it, within it, and because of it, a new kind of biology is taking shape. The next fossils will not look like ordinary microbes. They will be broad, soft, strange impressions in ancient seafloor sediment, as if the planet has begun testing the idea of bodies before it fully knows what bodies are for. The first bodies appear like messages pressed into mud by a world still learning how to be alive in a larger way. They do not look like the animals that later fill textbooks and museum halls. They have no jaws, no eyes that can be confidently reconstructed. No bones, no shells, no limbs, no teeth, and no obvious expression of fear or hunger. Many are soft, quilted, frond-like, oval, ribbed, or leaf-shaped, preserved as impressions on ancient seafloors where storms, microbial mats, and rapid burial briefly conspired to save them from erasure. For billions of years, life has been mostly invisible without a microscope. Then, in the Ediacaran period, beginning after the great Cryogenian ice ages and stretching toward the dawn of the Cambrian, Earth begins leaving fossils large enough for the naked eye to follow. The Ediacaran world is strange because it feels both close and unreachable. These organisms live in seas under skies with more oxygen than the Archean or early Proterozoic, but still not the fully modern atmosphere. The continents are arranged differently. The oceans carry a chemistry unlike today's, and the seafloor is often covered by microbial mats, sticky living films that stabilize sediment. Those mats may be crucial to preservation. A soft organism lying on or within mat-covered sediment can leave a trace that ordinary loose mud might destroy. In this way, the microbial world that dominated Earth for so long becomes the surface on which larger life writes its first visible signatures. The old world does not vanish, it becomes the paper. Some Ediacaran organisms seem almost botanical at first glance, like fronds anchored to the seafloor, rising into quiet water. Others resemble flattened discs, segmented quilts, or elongated forms with repeated units. Names such as Dickinsonia, Charnia, Kimberella, and Rangia belong to creatures whose identities remain debated in detail, though some are now widely accepted as early animals or close relatives. Dickinsonia, for example, appears as a ribbed oval, sometimes small, sometimes more than a meter long, and chemical evidence has strengthened its interpretation as an animal. Kimberella may have moved over the seafloor and grazed or scraped microbial mats, hinting at behavior rather than passive existence. Yet many Ediacaran forms do not fit neatly into modern categories. The evidence remains incomplete, and the deeper one looks, the more the old tree of life seems to blur. This is part of their power. The Ediacaran organisms are not simply primitive versions of later animals. Some may represent early branches of animal evolution. Some may be extinct experiments in multicellular life. Some may belong near familiar groups, while others may occupy vanished biological architectures that left no clear descendants. They remind us that evolution does not move like a ladder toward modern forms. It explores. It tests body plans. It builds structures that work for a time and then disappear. The Ediacaran seas may have contained ecosystems unlike anything alive today. Communities where soft bodies absorbed nutrients, filtered particles, grazed microbial surfaces, or lived through strategies difficult to imagine because their modern analogues are gone. Oxygen is part of the explanation, but not the whole explanation. Larger animals need energy, and oxygen makes high-energy metabolism easier. Yet it is too simple to say that oxygen rose and animals appeared. Oxygen levels vary across environments, especially in shallow seas where day and night cycles can create dramatic changes. Photosynthesis during daylight releases oxygen, while respiration and decay at night consume it, in some benthic or seafloor settings. Organisms may have experienced daily swings between more oxygenated and more stressful conditions. Such variability could have acted as a pressure, favouring bodies and metabolisms able to tolerate change. The rise of animals may not have happened in a perfectly improving ocean, but in a patchy, unstable one where stress itself encouraged adaptation. There is a lesser-known drama in that idea. The earliest animals may not have emerged simply because Earth became comfortable. They may have emerged because Earth became uneven. Shallow marine environments offered light, nutrients, microbial food, chemical gradients, and danger in the form of fluctuating oxygen. Organisms that could move, regulate their internal chemistry, feed selectively, or tolerate stress gained advantages. A body is not just a shape. It is a solution to environmental pressure. It separates inside from outside. It allows tissues to specialize. It can bring oxygen and nutrients inward, carry waste outward, and respond to a world that changes hour by hour. In that sense, the first animals are not just ornaments of a thawed planet, they are answers to instability. Near the end of the Ediacaran, the fossil record begins to show more signs of movement. Simple traces appear: trails, burrows, scratch-like marks, disturbed sediment. These traces are revolutionary. A body fossil tells us that something existed. A trace fossil tells us that something behaved. It moved across a surface, pushed through sediment, fed, explored, or avoided conditions. Once animals begin disturbing the seafloor, the ancient microbial mat world changes. Sediments are mixed. Surfaces are broken. Nutrients are cycled differently. The quiet layered backgrounds that help preserve Ediacaran impressions become less common in many environments as burrowing animals transform the seabed. Life is no longer merely living on the planet's surfaces. It is engineering them. Then comes the Cambrian period, beginning around 539 million years ago, and the tempo of visible evolution seems to quicken. The phrase Cambrian explosion can sound as if animals suddenly appear from nowhere, which is misleading. The roots are older, reaching back into the Ediacaran and perhaps before. But in Cambrian rocks, animals become much more diverse, more mineralized, more mobile, and more recognizable. Skeletons, shells, spines, claws, eyes, limbs, guts, and complex feeding structures enter the record with startling richness. Predation becomes more obvious, defense becomes more elaborate. The seafloor becomes crowded with burrowers, grazers, hunters, swimmers, and armoured forms. For the first time, the animal world begins to feel like a drama of pursuit and protection. Fossil sites from this interval are among the most important windows into early animal evolution. The Burgess Shale in Canada and the Chengjiang Biota in China are famous because they preserve soft-bodied organisms that normally vanish. Even more recent discoveries from South China, including fossils dated just before the Cambrian boundary, suggest that a burst of animal diversity was already underway in the late Ediacaran, around 546 to 539 million years ago. This matters because it softens the old image of a sudden Cambrian miracle. The explosion may be less a single detonation and more a rapid unveiling, as animals that had been evolving in smaller, softer, or less easily preserved forms began leaving clearer fossils in a changing world. The Cambrian seas are full of creatures that seem to come from a dream of anatomy. Trilobites crawl over sediment with jointed legs and mineralized armor. Sponges filter water through porous bodies. Early arthropods swim and hunt. Worm-like animals burrow and feed. Brachiopods attach to surfaces in shells. Mollusk relatives experiment with hard parts. Some forms, like Anomalocaris, become icons of early predation, with grasping appendages and large eyes. Others look so odd that their placement in the tree of life has been revised repeatedly as new fossils and new methods improve interpretation. Scholars still debate relationships among many early groups, because Cambrian evolution preserves both ancestors of modern lineages and extinct side branches that flourished briefly and vanished. What changes most profoundly is the nature of ecological interaction. Before animals, life changes Earth mostly through chemistry and microbial structure. With animals, behavior becomes a planetary force. Predators drive prey to evolve armor, burrowing, speed, camouflage, or spines. Prey drive predators to evolve better senses, stronger appendages, and new hunting strategies. Burrowers oxygenate sediments and reshape microbial communities. Filter feeders clear particles from water. Reef builders begin constructing habitats that others use. Evolution becomes an arms race, but also a web of cooperation, competition, and environmental engineering. The ocean is no longer merely a chemical basin. It is a living arena. Yet the mystery remains. Why then? Why did complex animals become abundant when they did, after billions of years of microbial dominance? Oxygen, genetics, developmental systems, ecological feedback, nutrient supply, continental breakup, ocean chemistry, and post-glacial environmental change all likely matter. No single explanation fully accounts for this. The rise of animals is not one key turning in one lock. It is many locks opening unevenly across the planet. Earth needed enough oxygen, but also the right cells, the right genes, the right ecological pressures, the right preservation conditions, and perhaps the destabilizing inheritance of ice ages that had remade oceans and nutrient cycles. By the close of this transformation, Earth has crossed another boundary. Life is no longer only microscopic or soft and enigmatic. It has mouths, shells, eyes, legs, burrows, instincts, and bodies that can change the world around them. The old microbial planet still exists beneath everything, in mats, sediments, water columns, and chemical cycles. But now it shares the stage with animals. The seas are alive in a way they have never been before. And once animals learn to move through water, dig into mud, and build armor against one another, the next step becomes almost inevitable over enough time. Life will begin pressing toward shorelines, into light, air, and gravity, where bare rock waits under an empty sky. The shore begins as a boundary that life approaches slowly, almost by accident. For most of Earth's history, land is an exposed mineral world rock, dust, volcanic slopes, river channels, bare plains, and coastlines hammered by waves. There is no grass softening the ground, no tree roots splitting stone, no insects humming above pools. Rain falls on naked continents and carries minerals toward the sea. Wind moves across surfaces with little to catch it. The land is not empty because Earth is dead, but because life has not yet learned how to live there in large, lasting forms. The ocean remains the great shelter, the old cradle of cells and animals. Yet every tide, every floodplain, every shallow lagoon brings living things near the edge of another world. Before animals walk onto land, plants begin changing it. Their story does not start with towering forests, but with small, low, moisture-loving organisms descended from green algae. They likely begin as simple forms clinging to wet surfaces, living close to water, dependent on spores, thin tissues, and protective chemistry against drying sunlight. The transition is difficult. Water supports bodies, air does not. In water, nutrients arrive dissolved around the organism, on land. They must be gathered from rock and soil that barely exists. In water, reproductive cells can move easily, on land. Desiccation is a constant threat. Ultraviolet radiation strikes harder without the shielding of depth. Gravity becomes more severe. Yet land also offers opportunity sunlight without water above it. Carbon dioxide in the air, mineral nutrients in fresh rock, and open space with few large competitors. The first land plants help invent the landscapes they inhabit. By sending early root-like structures or filaments into mineral surfaces, by trapping sediments, by producing organic matter, and by interacting with fungi and microbes, they begin forming true soils. Fungal partners may have been essential, helping plants gather phosphorus and other nutrients from rock in exchange for carbon-rich compounds made by photosynthesis. This partnership between plants and fungi is one of the quieter revolutions in Earth history. Long before forests, long before flowers, land becomes habitable through cooperation so small it leaves only subtle traces. What survives in the record suggests that the conquest of land is not a heroic march by one lineage, but a network of alliances among plants, fungi, bacteria, and minerals. As plants spread through the Paleozoic, they alter the atmosphere and climate. Photosynthesis draws carbon dioxide from the air. Organic carbon is buried in sediments. Weathering accelerates as roots and microbial partners break down rock. Oxygen levels eventually rise, though not smoothly and not everywhere. The land darkens with vegetation. Riverbanks stabilize. Floodplains change shape. Sediment moves differently. The continents are no longer merely geological surfaces. They are biological surfaces. Life begins to hold the land in place. Animals follow along paths opened by plants and microbial communities. Arthropods are among the earliest major colonizers' millipede-like forms, arachnid relatives, insects and their kin, animals with jointed limbs and hard exoskeletons that help resist drying and provide support in air. Their bodies are already segmented, armored, and mobile. They do not need to solve the problem of backbone or lungs in the way vertebrates will. Small size helps. A hard outer cuticle helps. Eggs and reproductive strategies gradually adapt to terrestrial conditions. The earliest land ecosystems may look modest, but they are revolutionary little animals moving over mats, stems, spores, and damp ground beneath a sky no animal has previously occupied in such numbers. Meanwhile, in the water, vertebrates are changing. Fish diversify through the Paleozoic seas and freshwater systems. Some develop jaws, a major innovation that transforms feeding. Others develop armor, paired fins, stronger internal skeletons, lungs or lung-like air-breathing structures, and limbs in embryo before limbs exist on land. The old image of a fish deciding to crawl out of a drying pond is too simple. The transition from fish to tetrapods happens through a series of shallow water adaptations moving through weed-choked channels, propping the body in low oxygen water, breathing air when dissolved oxygen is poor, navigating floodplains, and perhaps exploiting food near the water's edge. The evidence remains incomplete, but fossils have turned this transition from a vague idea into a sequence of remarkable forms. Tiktaalik, discovered in Arctic Canada, is one famous example because it combines fish-like and tetrapod-like features, scales and fins, but also a neck, ribs, and fin bones that hint at weight-bearing possibilities. Earlier and later fossils, such as Eusthenopteron, Acanthostega, and Ichthyostega, show that limbs evolved before fully terrestrial walking. Some early tetrapods had many digits, not the neat five-fingered pattern that later becomes familiar. Some were probably still mostly aquatic. This is a surprising detail. Legs did not begin as tools for marching across dry land. They likely began as tools for maneuvering in water, pushing through vegetation, lifting the head, anchoring the body, or moving through complex shallows. Land walking was not the original destination. It was one possibility opened by anatomy that evolved for something else. The Devonian period, often called the Age of Fishes, becomes a time of extraordinary experimentation. Coral reefs expand in warm seas. Armoured placoderms dominate many waters. Lobe-finned fishes and ray-finned fishes diversify. On land, early plants grow taller, and by the late Devonian, forests begin to appear. These are not modern forests of birdsong and flowers. They are strange stands of lycopsids, early tree-like plants, progymnosperms, and other lineages whose leaves, trunks, spores, and branching patterns belong to vanished worlds. The first forests cast shade over rivers and wetlands, drop organic debris into floodplains, and deepen soils. Roots break rock more powerfully than ever before. The atmosphere responds, the carbon cycle shifts. The land becomes cooler, wetter in some places, more structured, and more inviting to animals that can manage the risk of air. But the Devonian also carries crisis. The late Devonian extinctions do not form one simple event, but a prolonged interval of ecological disruption, especially in marine environments. Reef systems suffer badly. Many armoured fishes decline. Changes in sea level, climate, ocean oxygen, volcanism, plant-driven weathering, and nutrient runoff have all been considered as contributing factors. No single explanation fully accounts for the pattern. It may have been a drawn-out unravelling, a series of pulses rather than a single catastrophe. This is another recurring lesson of Earth's history. Innovation and extinction can share the same stage. Forests rise, vertebrates move toward land, marine ecosystems struggle. The planet opens one door while closing others. After the Devonian, the Carboniferous world grows lush in many regions. Vast wetlands spread across tropical lowlands, filled with giant club moss trees, horsetails, seed ferns, and early relatives of conifers. Oxygen levels rise high enough that some arthropods grow to startling sizes, including dragonfly-like insects with wingspans far larger than modern forms, and millipede relatives that could stretch longer than a person's leg. These giants are often described with a sense of fantasy, but they are products of real atmospheric and ecological conditions: high oxygen, moist forests, limited vertebrate predators in some niches, and the structure of ancient ecosystems may all contribute. Still, the details remain debated, and not every Carboniferous creature was gigantic. The world is stranger than the modern one, but not a monster gallery. The Carboniferous forests also bury enormous amounts of plant material in waterlogged, oxygen-poor swamps. Over time, this buried carbon becomes coal. The coal seams that humans later mine are not merely fuel, they are compressed forests from an ancient climate system. Sunlight stored in Paleozoic wood and leaves. This is a lesser-known intimacy between deep time and modern history. Industrial civilization burns the remains of carboniferous wetlands and returns their carbon to the air in a geological instant. A quiet swamp from 300 million years ago becomes part of the modern climate story. By the end of this great movement from sea to land, Earth has become visibly alive across continents. Plants root into soil, arthropods move through leaf litter, amphibian-like vertebrates haunt wetlands and river margins. The air contains more oxygen, the ground holds organic matter, and the carbon cycle has been altered by forests. But this new green world is not permanent. Continents drift toward assembly, climates shift, wetlands shrink in some regions, lineages adapt, split, and vanish. The land has been colonized, but it has not been secured. Ahead lies a world of supercontinents, deserts, reptiles, synapsids, and an extinction so severe that life itself will seem to pass through a narrow gate. The land that rises before the dinosaurs is not a world waiting politely for them. It is already ancient, crowded, experimental, and dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with the great reptiles that later inherit the Mesozoic. By the Permian period, beginning around 299 million years ago, life has crossed oceans, rooted continents, filled swamps, tested limbs, lungs, eggs, jaws, armor, venom, speed, and endurance. The old Paleozoic seas still hold complex communities, but the continents are changing into something harsher. Land masses drift together until they form the supercontinent Pangaea, a vast assembly stretching from pole to pole, surrounded by an enormous ocean and shaped by climates more extreme than those of a broken-up world. Interior regions lie far from moist sea air. Seasonal droughts deepen. Deserts spread. Wet coal forests retreat in many places. Earth is becoming larger, drier, and more continental. And life has to learn how to survive on a planet that no longer offers the same sheltering swamps. Pangaea is one of the great geographical facts of the Permian, and it changes almost everything. When continents merge, coastlines shrink relative to land area, shallow seas disappear, ocean circulation shifts, and the interiors of continents become more vulnerable to heat and drought. The world is not uniformly barren. There are still forests, river plains, wetlands, uplands, coastal regions, and polar ecosystems in the southern lands of Gondwana. Glossopterous forests spread across cool temperate regions, their tongue-shaped leaves later becoming one of the key fossil clues that the southern continents were once joined. But across much of the supercontinent, the old carboniferous wetland world gives way to environments where seasonal dryness rewards new adaptations. Life on land begins to favour bodies that can carry water more carefully, reproduce away from open ponds, and move through tougher terrain. One of the most important inventions in this story is the amniotic egg. Though by the Permian it's already older than the period itself, unlike amphibian-style reproduction, which remains tied to water in many forms, the amniotic egg protects the developing embryo within membranes and allows reproduction in drier environments. This does not mean every early amniote simply walks into deserts and thrives, but it changes the rules. Reproduction is no longer chained so tightly to ponds and streams. From early amniotes come two great branches that matter deeply to the future sauropsids, the broader line leading eventually toward reptiles, birds, and dinosaurs, and synapsids, the line that will much later lead to mammals. In the Permian, it is the synapsids, not dinosaurs, that dominate many land ecosystems. This is a point worth lingering on because the popular imagination often rushes from amphibians to dinosaurs as if nothing important fills the gap. But the Permian is, in many ways, the age of the mammal line animals. Early synapsids include forms like Dimetrodon, often mistaken for a dinosaur because of its dramatic sail, though it lives tens of millions of years before the first dinosaurs and belongs closer to the lineage that eventually produces mammals. Later synapsids, especially therapsids, become even more varied and sophisticated. Some have stronger limbs held more beneath the body. Some show differentiated teeth, with incisors, canines, and grinding surfaces beginning to divide labour in the mouth. Some may have had higher metabolic rates than many earlier vertebrates, though exactly how warm-blooded or active they were remains debated. What survives in the record suggests an evolutionary world already experimenting with features that, far in the future, will feel mammalian. The Permian land is filled with animals that seem like rough drafts from several possible futures. There are bulky plant-eaters with barrel bodies and heavy skulls. There are saber-toothed predators that are not cats, not even mammals, but distant relatives on the mammal stem. There are armoured pariasaurs, agile reptiles, amphibians lingering in wetter habitats, insects moving through vegetation, and strange herbivores cropping tough plants under a sun that shines on one continuous supercontinent. Some therapsids, like gorgonopsians, become formidable predators with long canine teeth and powerful jaws. Others, such as dicynodonts, evolve beaked mouths and tusks, becoming some of the most successful herbivores of their time. The Permian is not a primitive waiting room. It is a complete world with its own logic, its own rulers, and its own fragility. In the seas, life is also rich but vulnerable. Brachiopods, bryozoans, crinoids, ammonoid relatives, corals, sponges, mollusks, and many other organisms build and occupy marine ecosystems. Reefs exist, though they differ from modern coral reefs in important ways. Trilobites, once icons of Cambrian abundance, are still present but diminished, living out the last chapters of a lineage that has survived for hundreds of millions of years. The oceans contain deep histories layered on top of one another. Cambrian survivors, Paleozoic reef builders, predators with coiled shells, bottom dwellers filtering and feeding in sediments. The seas seem durable because they have survived so much already, but durability is not immunity. The trouble begins deep below what any animal can sense. Near the end of the Permian, around 252 million years ago, massive volcanic activity erupts across what is now Siberia. The Siberian traps are not a single ordinary volcano. They are a vast, large igneous province, an enormous outpouring of basaltic lava and associated intrusions that release heat, carbon dioxide, sulfur gases, halogens, and other compounds into the atmosphere and oceans. The eruptions may unfold in pulses over hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps with particularly destructive intervals. Magma intruding into carbon-rich sediments may release additional greenhouse gases and toxic compounds. The exact sequence remains debated, but the scale is almost beyond ordinary imagination, a volcanic crisis large enough to disturb the chemistry of the entire planet. The consequences cascade. Carbon dioxide rises and the climate warms dramatically. Oceans absorb heat and carbon, becoming more acidic and less hospitable to organisms that build shells or skeletons from carbonate minerals. Warmer water holds less oxygen. Ocean circulation may weaken, allowing oxygen-poor waters to expand. In some regions, anoxia and even euxinia, oxygen-poor waters rich in hydrogen sulfide, may spread through marine environments, on land. Heat and drought stress ecosystems already living under strong continental seasonality. Wildfires may increase. Vegetation suffers, soil erodes, rivers carry pulses of sediment and nutrients into the sea, worsening marine instability. No single explanation fully accounts for every pattern of death, but the crisis appears to be a system failure, not a single blow. This is the Great Dying, the largest mass extinction in the Phanerozoic record. Roughly 9 out of 10 marine species disappear, and a very large share of land vertebrate diversity is lost as well. The exact numbers vary by method and group, and extinction does not strike all places or organisms equally, but the scale is unmatched. Trilobites vanish completely after surviving since the Cambrian. Many reef systems collapse. Brachiopods, ammonoids, corals, and seafloor communities are devastated. On land, dominant synapsid groups are broken apart. The Great Permian experiment in mammal line diversity is cut down. Forests and food webs are disrupted. The world does not end, but for many lineages it narrows to nothing. A lesser-known horror of this extinction is that recovery is not quick. Earth does not simply clear the smoke, cool down, and refill itself with life. The early aftermath remains unstable, hot, oxygen-stressed, and ecologically simplified. Some survivors do well precisely because they can tolerate hardship, breed quickly, eat broadly, or endure disturbed environments. The disaster favours opportunists. Complex ecosystems take far longer to rebuild. The Great Dying is therefore not only a mass death at the boundary between the Permian and Triassic, it is a long shadow cast into the next world. By the time the Paleozoic era ends, Earth has lost an entire version of itself. The coal forests, trilobite seas, vast synapsid faunas, and many reef communities that defined earlier ages are gone or shattered. Pangaea remains, but the life upon it has been stripped down and rearranged. The planet has passed through fire again, not the founding fire of the Hadean, but volcanic fire rising through a mature world and exposing how connected climate, ocean, atmosphere, and life truly are. The survivors move forward into the Triassic not as victors in any grand sense, but as remnants. From those remnants, in a damaged greenhouse world, a new age will begin to assemble. The world that follows the Great Dying is not a fresh paradise. It is a damaged greenhouse, stripped of much of its former richness, with ecosystems simplified and climates pushed toward extremes. The Triassic begins around 252 million years ago, but the boundary is not a clean door opening into recovery. It is more like a long passage through heat, scarcity, and ecological instability. The oceans are still recovering from oxygen stress, acidification, and the collapse of many older communities. On land, forests do not simply return everywhere at once. In some regions, vegetation remains sparse or unstable, and without strong plant cover, the land loses part of its ability to draw carbon from the air and hold soils in place. A wounded biosphere cannot regulate the planet as effectively as a healthy one. This is one of the quieter lessons of the Permian-Triassic disaster when life collapses. Climate can become even harder for life. For millions of years after the extinction, recovery is uneven. Some marine ecosystems rebuild slowly, and some groups radiate into the empty spaces left by the vanished Paleozoic world. Ammonoids rebound with surprising speed in some settings. Bivalves, gastropods, sponges, and new reef builders begin to reshape the seas. Yet the old Paleozoic order is gone. Trilobites do not return. Many brachiopod-dominated communities never regain their former power. Reefs take time to stabilize. The evidence remains incomplete in many regions. But what survives in the record suggests that the planet does not recover as a single system at a single pace. Life comes back in patches, with local experiments, setbacks, and bursts of expansion. On land, the survivors include synapsids, reptiles, amphibians, insects, and many smaller forms that endured where others disappeared. Among the most successful early Triassic land animals is Lystrosaurus, a stocky, tusked dicynodont synapsid whose fossils are found across ancient southern continents. Its success is sometimes treated almost comically, as if one odd survivor briefly inherited the Earth. But its abundance reveals something serious in a disrupted world. The winners are often not the most elegant or specialized animals. They are the ones that can tolerate stress, feed on available plants, reproduce effectively, and cross harsh landscapes. Lystrosaurus is not a failure of evolution's imagination. It is a sign of a planet where survival favors toughness over splendor. Yet the Triassic does not remain a world of aftermath forever. As ecosystems rebuild, new lineages diversify. Among the most important are archosaurs, the broader group that will give rise to crocodile-line animals, pterosaurs, dinosaurs, and eventually birds. Early archosaurs do not begin as inevitable rulers. They share the world with many other animals, including remaining synapsids, large amphibians, and diverse reptiles. Some crocodile-line archosaurs become dominant predators and armored herbivores. Many are far more varied than their modern crocodilian descendants suggest. The early Mesozoic is not immediately the age of dinosaurs. It is an age of competition among survivors, a world where several futures seem possible. Dinosaurs appear in the Triassic, likely around 230 million years ago, though the exact timing and early relationships remain debated as new fossils refine the picture. At first, they are not giants. They are generally small to medium-sized, lightly built, upright-limbed animals moving through ecosystems still dominated in many places by other reptiles and archosaurs. Their upright posture matters. Limbs positioned more directly beneath the body allow efficient movement compared with sprawling forms. Some early dinosaurs are swift carnivores. Others begin herbivorous or omnivorous experiments. They are only one branch among many, but they carry anatomical advantages that will matter when the world changes again. That change comes near the end of the Triassic, around 201 million years ago, during another mass extinction. As Pangaea begins to rift apart, enormous volcanic eruptions associated with the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province release vast amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases. Climate shifts, ocean chemistry changes, and many competing groups disappear or decline. The end-Triassic extinction is less famous than the asteroid that later kills the non-avian dinosaurs, and less devastating than the Great Dying, but it is decisive. It removes many large archosaur competitors and opens ecological space. Dinosaurs, already present, survive and expand. Their rise is not a simple story of superiority from the beginning. It is also a story of opportunity after catastrophe. The Jurassic world that follows is warmer, greener in many places, and increasingly shaped by the breakup of Pangaea. Continents begin separating, creating new coastlines, shallow seas, rift valleys, and regional climates. The single supercontinent gives way to a more fragmented Earth, and fragmentation encourages diversity. Populations become isolated, landscapes vary, evolution takes different paths on different landmasses. Dinosaurs radiate into enormous herbivores, agile predators, armored forms, plated forms, and small feathered lineages. Pterosaurs fill the skies, the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight. In the seas, marine reptiles such as ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs occupy roles that no dinosaur truly fills, while ammonites coil through the water and plankton communities help shape ocean chemistry. The Mesozoic is not only dinosaurs, it is a whole rearranged Earth. One lesser-known part of the dinosaur story is that feathers do not begin as bird decorations. Many theropod dinosaurs show evidence of feathers or feather-like coverings, and these structures likely evolve first for insulation, display, brooding behavior, sensory functions, or some combination of uses before powered flight in birds. The old image of dinosaurs as uniformly scaly, sluggish giants has collapsed under fossil evidence. Many are active animals. Some are social in ways that can be inferred cautiously from trackways, nesting grounds, and bone beds. Some grow rapidly, some care for eggs, some display with crests, horns, plates, colours that rarely fossilize, and body coverings that make them far stranger and more vivid than the grey reptiles of older imagination. Scholars still debate the details of behaviour, metabolism, and appearance for many groups, but the living texture of dinosaurs has become richer with every decade of discovery. Plants are changing too. For much of the early Mesozoic, landscapes are dominated by conifers, cycads, ginkgos, ferns, horsetails, and other non-flowering plants. Forests can be dense, but they are not modern broadleaf forests filled with grasses and flowers. Then, in the Cretaceous, flowering plants, or angiosperms, rise and diversify. Their spread transforms terrestrial ecosystems. Flowers change relationships with insects. Fruits change diets. Leaves change forest structure. Pollination becomes a more intricate ecological bargain. The rise of angiosperms does not instantly replace older plant worlds, but it introduces a new biological tempo, faster reproduction in many lineages, new food sources, and new habitats. By late in the Cretaceous, Earth's landscapes are beginning to look more familiar in some ways, even while dinosaurs still dominate the land. The continents continue their slow escape from Pangaea. The Atlantic widens. India begins its long journey northward. The Tethys Ocean stretches between land masses that will later collide and fold into mountains. Sea levels rise and fall. Warm, shallow seas flood continental interiors, including great seaways that divide land masses and create rich marine habitats. Climate is generally warmer than today, with little or no permanent polar ice for long intervals. Though Mesozoic climate is not one unchanging tropical dream, there are humid forests, arid interiors, polar regions with seasonal darkness, volcanic episodes, sea level changes, and oceanic anoxic events when parts of the sea lose oxygen and bury organic-rich sediments. Even in the age of dinosaurs, Earth remains restless. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs are part of this restless success. They survive climate shifts, continental breakup, ecological competition, and earlier extinction pulses. They become some of the largest land animals ever to live, but also remain small in many lineages. They are not a single type of creature, but an evolving dynasty sauropods with long necks and columnar limbs, theropods with slicing teeth or feathers and wings, ornithischians with beaks, armour, horns, plates, and elaborate chewing systems. Their dominance is real, but it is not static. The dinosaur world at the end of the Cretaceous is not the same as the dinosaur world of the Jurassic. It has been rewritten many times. By the late Cretaceous, Earth is full of life layered upon older evolutions. The oxygen once released by microbes supports enormous bodies. The soils built by plants feed forests and floodplains. The continents shaped by tectonics divide populations into evolutionary provinces. Mammals live mostly in smaller roles, but they are diverse, persistent, and waiting in the shadows of larger animals. Birds, the living dinosaurs already in the sky, move through forests and along coasts. Flowers bloom. Insects pollinate. Seas teem with reptiles, fish, ammonites, and plankton. It is a flourishing world, not a doomed one in any obvious sense. And that is what makes the next turn so stark. The dinosaurs do not decline because the story has grown tired of them. They are struck down in a world still alive with momentum, beneath a sky that gives almost no warning before fire returns from space. The end of the Cretaceous does not begin as a slow fading of the dinosaur world. It begins as a point of light crossing the sky faster than any living eye can understand. Somewhere beyond the atmosphere, an asteroid roughly city-sized, perhaps around 10 kilometers across, enters Earth's path after a long, silent history of orbiting the Sun. It is not large compared with a planet, not even large compared with a continent, yet it carries enough speed and mass to change the direction of life. When it strikes what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, near Chicxulub, it releases energy on a scale beyond ordinary imagination. Rock behaves like liquid. The crust opens. A crater more than 100 kilometers wide forms in minutes. The age of dinosaurs does not end because they are weak. It ends because Earth is hit in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with catastrophic precision. The impact site matters. The asteroid does not strike deep open ocean or hard crystalline shield alone. It hits a shallow marine platform rich in carbonate and sulfate rocks. That geology turns the impact into a chemical weapon. Vaporized rock, dust, sulfur aerosols, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and soot enter the atmosphere. Some material is blasted above the atmosphere and falls back across the globe as incandescent particles. The sky may glow with re-entering debris. Heat pulses through the upper atmosphere and reaches the surface in many regions. Wildfires may ignite across some landscapes, though the extent and pattern remain debated. The first hours are violent, but the longer disaster comes from what the impact throws into the air. Near the crater, the destruction is immediate. Tsunamis surge through nearby seas. Earthquakes shake landscapes far from the impact. Sediments slump and rush along coasts. Waves strip shorelines and carry shattered material inland and back again. In a geological instant, a thriving tropical marine region becomes a ring of broken rock, vapor, melt, and returning water. But the dinosaurs that vanish are not only those near the crater. The true extinction is global. And global disasters require planetary mechanisms. Dust and aerosols spread through the atmosphere, dimming sunlight. Sulfur compounds form particles that reflect sunlight and cool the surface. Photosynthesis weakens. Food webs begin to fail from their foundations upward. This is the impact winter, and it may be the most important part of the catastrophe. Plants and plankton depend on sunlight. Herbivores depend on plants. Carnivores depend on herbivores and smaller animals. Marine food chains depend heavily on photosynthetic plankton and the organisms that feed on them. If sunlight drops sharply for months or years, even a world that survives the initial fireball can starve in layers. The evidence remains incomplete in the sense that no one can measure each dark day directly, but soot, shocked minerals, ejecta layers, crater geology, and extinction patterns all point toward a rapid, severe disruption. The famous thin clay layer marking the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, enriched in iridium, is a global trace of something extraterrestrial entering Earth's sediments. Iridium is rare in Earth's crust but more common in some meteorites, and its discovery in boundary rocks helped transform an old paleontological puzzle into one of the most compelling extinction stories in science. Before the impact hypothesis gained strength, researchers considered climate change, sea level shifts, volcanic activity, disease, gradual decline, and other possibilities. Some of those factors still matter in the broader context. The late Cretaceous world was already changing. Sea levels had shifted, ecosystems were not frozen in place. Enormous volcanism in India, the Deccan Traps, was releasing gases and altering climate around the same general interval. Scholars still debate how much stress Deccan volcanism added before or after the impact, and whether it shaped the severity of extinction in some groups. But the Chicxulub impact remains the central trigger for the abrupt global boundary crisis. The extinction is selective, as all extinctions are. Non-avian dinosaurs disappear, but birds survive, meaning one branch of dinosaurs continues into the modern world. Ammonites vanish from the seas after hundreds of millions of years of success. Many marine reptiles, already distinct from dinosaurs, are gone. Pterosaurs disappear from the skies. Plankton communities are devastated. Many plants suffer severe losses, especially in some regions where spores from ferns become common after the boundary, a sign of disturbed landscapes recovering from ecological collapse. Yet crocodilian relatives survive. Turtles survive. Amphibians survive. Mammals survive. Insects survive in many lineages. Life does not end evenly. It passes through filters, and those filters often favor small size, flexible diets, aquatic or semi-aquatic habits, burrowing, seeds, dormancy, and the ability to endure ecological scarcity. One lesser-known reason some animals may survive is that detritus-based food webs can persist when sunlight-driven food webs collapse. Dead plant matter, fungi, decaying organic material, seeds, roots, aquatic sediments, and buried resources may support small animals through the worst interval. A small mammal that eats insects, seeds, carrion, or underground material has options that a giant herbivorous dinosaur does not. A freshwater turtle or crocodilian can draw on aquatic systems buffered in different ways from immediate collapse. This does not make survival easy, and it does not mean every small creature lives. It means the catastrophe favors animals with low energy demands and flexible access to hidden food. In the aftermath of darkness, being magnificent is less useful than being adaptable. For the non-avian dinosaurs, the filters are brutal. Many are large, dependent on abundant vegetation or prey, and tied into food webs that cannot withstand prolonged darkness and cooling. Eggs, growth rates, geographic range, and reproductive biology may all have influenced survival or extinction, but no single explanation fully accounts for the disappearance of such a diverse group. The asteroid does not kill every dinosaur in the same way. It collapses the world that supports them. Some may die in the first fires and tsunamis. Others endure for a time in darkened, cold, hungry landscapes where plants fail and prey declines. The fossil record rarely preserves these final days directly. It preserves the boundary, the disappearance, the sudden absence after a long abundance. The oceans are shaken just as deeply. The extinction of ammonites marks the end of one of the great marine lineages of the Phanerozoic. Plankton losses ripple through marine food webs. Reef communities are disrupted. Some fish survive and diversify later. Sharks and rays pass through. The marine world that emerges in the Paleogene is not simply the Cretaceous ocean with a few missing species. It is reorganized, in time, new plankton communities stabilize, new reef systems grow. And marine mammals, much later, enter seas once ruled by reptiles, but recovery takes time, and the first post-impact world is a world of absence. On land, the silence after the dinosaurs is often imagined too simply, as if mammals immediately step into empty thrones. In reality, early Paleogene ecosystems rebuild unevenly. Mammals are already diverse before the impact, but mostly small compared with the great dinosaurs. After the extinction, ecological space opens, plants recover, forests return in changing forms. Mammals begin to radiate into larger sizes and more varied diets. But this is not instant conquest. It takes millions of years for the New World to fill with large herbivores, carnivores, tree dwellers, swimmers, and eventually primates. Catastrophe creates opportunity, but opportunity still has to be evolved into bodies. The end Cretaceous impact reveals a truth that runs through the entire history of Earth. Life can be dominant without being secure. Dinosaurs rule land ecosystems for more than 160 million years, longer than mammals have dominated since, and yet their world can be broken by a single celestial accident amplified by geology and climate. The planet is not malicious, but it is not protective either. Its systems are connected so deeply that a rock from space can darken forests, starve oceans, erase lineages, and redirect evolution toward futures that were not inevitable. In the cooling shadow after Chicxulub, the age of dinosaurs closes, but the story of life does not become smaller. It becomes quieter for a while, then begins again among survivors moving beneath recovering trees. In the first long dawn after the impact, Earth belongs to survivors. The sky clears by degrees, forests return in uneven waves, and the empty places left by vanished giants begin to fill with smaller bodies moving through leaf litter, branches, burrows, river banks, and night. Mammals do not appear suddenly after the dinosaurs. They have already lived beside them for more than 100 million years, mostly in modest forms: insect eaters, climbers, gliders, diggers, swimmers, and small omnivores with warm blood, fur, sensitive noses, and teeth built for precise work. But after the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, the ceiling above them is lifted. The old rulers of land are gone except for birds, the surviving dinosaur lineage, and the mammals inherit not a kingdom, but a damaged world full of ecological vacancies. The early Paleogene is warm, humid in many places, and heavily forested. Without large non-avian dinosaurs browsing, trampling, nesting, and feeding through terrestrial ecosystems, plants and animals enter new relationships. Mammals begin increasing in size and variety. Some remain small and hidden, but others become larger herbivores, agile predators, tree dwellers, and shoreline feeders. Their teeth diversify into cutting, grinding, piercing, and crushing tools. Their limbs adapt for running, climbing, digging, swimming, and grasping. Their brains, senses, reproductive strategies, and social behaviors vary across lineages. The mammalian rise is often described as a triumph, but it is better understood as radiation after loss. The world opens because another world has ended. One of the surprising things about early Cenozoic mammals is how unfamiliar many of them would look. They are not simply early versions of modern horses, cats, elephants, and whales. Evolution experiments freely. Some hoofed mammals have strange skulls and body plans with no living equivalents. Some predators belong to groups that later disappear, replaced by carnivorans more familiar today. In South America, isolated for long stretches, mammals evolve into unique forms, including native ungulates and large predatory relatives of marsupials. In Australia, marsupials diversify in a separate theatre of evolution. On island continents and separated land masses, mammals do not march toward one global design. They become local answers to local worlds. The seas also begin to change in ways that would have astonished the Mesozoic. Marine reptiles are gone, leaving open ecological space in the oceans. Over millions of years, some mammals return to water. The ancestors of whales begin as land mammals near shorelines, likely moving between land and water before becoming increasingly aquatic. Fossils such as Pachycetus, Ambulocetus, and later Archaeocetes reveal a transition from walking limbs to powerful swimming bodies. From ears adapted for air to hearing underwater, from nostrils near the front of the snout to blowholes shifting upward. This is one of evolution's great reversals. Animals descended from fish once walked onto land, and much later, some of their mammalian descendants returned to the sea and became giants. The evidence is unusually rich, though details of behavior and environment remain debated. Above the land, birds diversify as well. They're not replacements for pterosaurs in any simple sense, because birds had already evolved before the impact. But after the extinction, they expand into many new forms, from seabirds to forest birds to ground-dwelling giants in some regions. Insects continue their long partnership with flowering plants. Forests become filled with fruit, seeds, nectar, leaves, and hidden animal movement. The Cenozoic is sometimes called the Age of Mammals, but that title can narrow the view too much. It is also an age of birds, flowering plants, insects, grasses, coral reefs, plankton, and microbes still governing the invisible chemical foundation of the planet. Climate, however, does not remain warm and gentle. The early Cenozoic includes episodes of intense greenhouse warmth, including the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum about 56 million years ago, when a rapid injection of carbon into the atmosphere and oceans drives global warming, ocean acidification, migrations, extinctions in deep-sea communities, and major shifts in ecosystems. The causes are still studied, with methane release, volcanic activity, carbon cycle feedbacks, and orbital patterns all discussed as contributing factors. What survives in the record suggests that Earth's climate system can respond sharply when carbon enters it quickly, even without human industry. The event is ancient, but its warning feels uncomfortably modern. Carbon does not need to be visible to alter the world. Over tens of millions of years, Earth begins cooling. Continents continue to move. India collides with Asia, helping raise the Himalayas and Tibetan Plateau, which influence weathering, monsoons, and atmospheric circulation. Australia separates from Antarctica, and ocean currents shift. Antarctica becomes increasingly isolated by circumpolar circulation, and ice begins to grow on the southern continent around the Eocene-Oligocene transition. Later, northern ice sheets become important as well. The greenhouse world gives way, unevenly and over long spans, to an icehouse planet. This does not mean Earth becomes uniformly cold. Warm intervals return. Forests expand and retreat. But the long Cenozoic trend bends toward cooler, drier, more seasonal conditions. As climate cools and dries in many regions, grasslands expand. Grasses had existed earlier, but during the Cenozoic they become ecologically powerful, spreading especially through open habitats where grazing animals and fire help maintain them. Grass is not soft background scenery in Earth history. It is a new kind of landscape engine. Many grasses grow from their bases, allowing them to survive grazing, Some contain silica bodies that wear down teeth. In response, grazing mammals evolve high-crowned teeth that can withstand abrasive diets. Horses, antelope, bison relatives, elephants, rhinos, and many other herbivores become part of open country ecosystems. Predators adapt too, with speed, endurance, ambush strategies, pack behavior in some lineages, and sharper specialization. A blade of grass can reshape a tooth, and a tooth can reshape a continent's food web. Fire becomes more important in many grassy landscapes. Lightning, seasonal dryness, and plant fuels create cycles of burning and regrowth. Fire prevents some forests from returning, recycles nutrients, and favors plants adapted to disturbance. It also creates mosaics of habitat patches of new growth, old grass, shrubs, open ground, and woodland edges. The Cenozoic world is therefore not merely cooling. It is becoming more patchy, more open in some places, more seasonal, and more demanding for animals that must migrate, graze, browse, store fat, follow rainfall, or endure cold. Primates evolve within this changing world, though their earlier story is tied more closely to trees than grasslands. After the extinction, primate relatives appear among forest branches, with grasping hands and feet, forward-facing eyes, and bodies suited to climbing, leaping, and judging distance. Over time, primates diversify into lemur-like forms, monkeys, apes, and eventually the lineage that leads toward humans. Their evolution is not separate from climate and vegetation. Forest expansion, fragmentation, fruit availability, continental connections, and changing habitats all shape primate history. The deep ancestry of humans begins not on open savanna alone, but in a shifting Cenozoic world where forests, woodlands, wetlands, and grasslands expand and contract around one another. By the late Cenozoic, ice becomes a recurring force again. Glaciers grow and shrink with orbital cycles. Sea levels fall when ice sheets expand and rise when they melt. Land bridges appear and disappear. Deserts shift. Monsoons strengthen or weaken. Animal populations are divided, reconnected, and driven into new ranges: mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, woolly rhinos, cave bears, giant kangaroos, terror birds in earlier South America, and many other large animals become part of a world shaped by cold pulses and open habitats. But even this dramatic Ice Age world rests on older foundations: oxygen from microbes, soils from plants, continents moved by tectonics, mammals released by extinction, grasses sharpened by climate and grazing. The Cenozoic teaches that recovery is not a return to what was lost. After the dinosaurs, Earth does not rebuild the Mesozoic. It invents something else. Mammals expand, whales enter the sea, birds fill the air, grasses spread across continents, ice gathers at the poles, and primates begin their long, uncertain path through branches, woodland edges, and changing climates. The planet is cooler now than in the age of dinosaurs, more seasonal, more familiar in outline, but still unstable beneath that familiarity. And within this restless world, one branch of apes will eventually stand upright often enough, walk far enough, and think deeply enough to become the first creature capable of telling Earth's story back to itself. The first humans do not appear suddenly on an open plain, already carrying tools, stories, and firelight. They emerge through a long, unsettled ancestry, inside a world of shifting forests, broken woodlands, lakes that swell and vanish, grasslands that expand and retreat, and climates that refuse to hold still. By the late Cenozoic, Africa is not a single backdrop but a mosaic of habitats. Wetlands lie near drier country. Wooded corridors open and close. Volcanic highlands cast shadows over basins where sediment quietly gathers bones. Apes move through trees and along ground edges, and in some of them, the balance of body and behavior begins to change. The human story starts not with certainty, but with instability. Bipedalism is one of the first great signs that this lineage is taking a different path. Walking upright does not evolve because one ancient ape decides to leave the forest and stride nobly into the savanna. That old image is too simple. Early hominins likely live in mixed environments where trees still matter, where climbing remains useful, and where moving on two legs offers advantages in some settings. Upright walking may help with carrying food, moving efficiently between scattered resources, seeing over vegetation, reducing heat load under open sun, or freeing the hands for gathering and manipulation. No single explanation fully accounts for its origin, and different pressures may have mattered at different times. What survives in the record suggests a gradual anatomical negotiation: pelvis, spine, knees, feet, toes, and skull position all changing across millions of years. The fossils are fragmentary, but they are enough to make the deep past feel strangely close. Sahelanthropus, Orrorin, Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, and other early hominins appear not as a straight line but as a branching experiment. Some are known from skull fragments, teeth, limb bones, or partial skeletons. Some remain difficult to place. Ardipithecus suggests a creature that still climbs, but also moves in ways unlike modern apes. Australopithecus afarensis, the species that includes the famous Lucy fossil, walks upright yet retains features useful for climbing. The Laetoli footprints, preserved in volcanic ash around 3.6 million years ago, show upright walkers crossing a landscape where the ground briefly becomes a recording surface. The prints are modest, almost quiet, but they reveal bodies moving through time with a familiarity that bones alone cannot give. Hands become important long before they write or carve symbols. Early hominins inherit grasping hands from ape ancestors, but as walking changes the role of the arms, the hands become increasingly available for carrying, selecting, striking, scraping, and shaping. Stone tools enter the record at least by around 3.3 million years ago in Kenya, earlier than the genus Homo itself, suggesting that tool use is not a sudden human invention, but an older behavior within the broader hominin world. Later older one tools, simple flakes and cores, appear around 2.6 million years ago and mark a more widespread technology. They look crude to modern eyes, but that judgment is unfair. A sharp stone flake can open hide, cut meat, scrape plant material, shape wood, and turn a small animal with weak natural weapons into something far more flexible. The first tools are not primitive thoughts made visible. They are ecological keys. Climate keeps pressing on this story. Around the time Homo emerges, Africa experiences environmental variability that may favor adaptability over narrow specialization. Lakes expand and shrink. Rainfall patterns shift. Grasslands spread in some regions while wooded habitats persist in others. Hominins do not evolve in a simple march from forest to savanna. They evolve in a world that keeps changing the rules. Species that can eat varied foods, move through different habitats, cooperate in flexible ways, and learn from experience may gain advantages. Teeth, jaws, legs, hands, and brains all respond unevenly to these pressures. Scholars still debate the exact relationship between climate pulses and hominin evolution, but the broad pattern is clear enough: human ancestry is shaped by a restless planet. The genus Homo brings new combinations of traits. Homo habilis and related early forms show larger brains than many earlier australopiths. Though their bodies remain small and their identities are debated, Homo erectus, appearing by roughly 1.9 million years ago, becomes one of the most successful and wide-ranging hominins in deep history. With longer legs, a more human-like body plan, and endurance suited to walking long distances, Homo erectus and related populations moved beyond Africa into parts of Eurasia. Their world includes open country, woodland edges, river systems, seasonal resources, predators, scavenging opportunities, and the constant need to read landscapes carefully. Survival depends not only on strength, but on memory where water lies, when fruits ripen, where stone can be found, where danger gathers, where shelter can be used. The Acheulean hand axe becomes one of the most remarkable artifacts of this long age. It appears in Africa more than 1.7 million years ago, and persists in various forms for over 1 million years. A hand axe can be beautifully symmetrical, carefully shaped on both sides, and useful for cutting. But its significance goes beyond function. It reveals planning, motor skill, learned technique, and perhaps cultural transmission across generations. For an object to remain recognizable across such vast time, knowledge must be passed on again and again. Yet the Acheulean is not universal. Some regions have different tool traditions, and the absence of hand axes in parts of East Asia for long periods has led to debates about raw materials, migration routes, cultural choices, and preservation. The evidence remains incomplete, but stone tools show that ancient humans are not merely adapting with bodies, they are adapting with learned behavior. Fire deepens the transformation, though its early history is difficult to pin down. Natural fire exists long before humans, sparked by lightning and fed by dry vegetation. The question is when hominins begin using it regularly, controlling it, carrying it, cooking with it, and building life around it. Claims for very early fire use are debated. Stronger evidence becomes clearer later. Fire offers warmth, light, protection from some predators, new ways to process food, and a gathering point that changes daily rhythm. Cooking may make some foods easier to digest and increase energy availability, influencing bodies and social life. Though the timing and scale remain contested, fire is more than a tool. It is a portable fragment of Earth's own deep power, taken from lightning and volcanism and brought into the small circle of human use. Movement across continents does not happen once. It happens repeatedly, unevenly, through expansions, retreats, local extinctions, and interbreeding. Homo erectus or closely related forms reach Georgia, Java, China, and other regions, adapting to climates and ecologies far from African origins. Later humans and human relatives occupy Europe, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, island landscapes, cold plains, forests, coastlines, and highland edges. Each movement depends on climate windows, available routes, water sources, prey and plant foods, and technologies suited to new problems. Sea levels fall during glacial periods, exposing land bridges and continental shelves. They rise again and erase coastlines where evidence may once have lain. The map of human evolution is therefore partly drowned, partly buried, and partly still unknown. By the time Homo sapiens appears in Africa by around 300,000 years ago, the human world is already crowded with relatives and ancestors. Neanderthals evolve in western Eurasia, Denisovans, known first through DNA from Denisova Cave and later from a small number of fossils, occupy parts of Asia in ways still only dimly understood. Other groups persist in island Southeast Asia and perhaps elsewhere. Homo sapiens is not born into an empty world waiting for modern humanity. It is one branch among several, shaped by climate instability, migration, isolation, contact, and adaptation. The later success of our species can make the outcome look inevitable, but it was not. The evidence suggests a tangled human family, not a clean ladder. What distinguishes Homo sapiens is not one magical trait appearing all at once. Brain shape, language capacity, social learning, symbolic behavior, long-distance exchange, tool variety, ecological flexibility, and cultural accumulation all matter, but each has roots and uncertainties. Early Homo sapiens populations live through African environmental shifts, develop varied technologies, use pigments, exploit coastal and inland resources, and eventually expand beyond Africa in ways that connect them to older human populations across Eurasia. Some expansions may fail or leave little trace. Others succeed and become part of the ancestry of living people. Human history, like Earth history, is not a straight ascent. It is a record of openings, losses, survival, and chance. The planet that produces humans is the same planet that forged oceans, froze nearly white, filled the air with oxygen, buried forests into coal, raised mountains, opened seas, and ended the dinosaurs with a rock from space. Human beings are late arrivals, but not separate from the story. Their bones are calcium from ancient seas. Their breath depends on microbial oxygen. Their food grows in soils built by plants and fungi. Their tools come from stone shaped by tectonics and erosion. And their migrations follow climates driven by ice, orbit, ocean, and atmosphere. By the end of this section of Earth's long unfolding, a new kind of creature has entered the restless world, one capable of remembering places it has never seen, imagining futures that do not yet exist, and carrying the planet's history unknowingly in every cell. The Ice Age world does not arrive as a single frozen stage, but as a rhythm of advance and retreat. Ice sheets grow across northern continents, then shrink. Sea levels fall as water is locked on land, then rise as glaciers melt. Deserts expand, forests withdraw, grasslands open, rivers change course, coastlines move far beyond their modern positions, and land bridges appear where seas once blocked the way. To live in such a world is to live inside movement. The ground beneath a population may remain familiar for generations, then slowly become drier, colder, wetter, or unreachable. Valleys fill with new animals. Coastlines vanish under returning water. Mountain passes open and close. Human evolution, in this late chapter, is not the story of one species walking across a stable map. It is the story of many human groups trying to survive a planet that keeps redrawing the map beneath them. By the late Pleistocene, Homo sapiens is not alone. In Western Eurasia, Neanderthals occupy landscapes of forests, steppe, limestone caves, river valleys, and cold plains. They are not the brutish caricatures of old imagination, but powerful human relatives adapted to demanding environments. Their bodies are stocky, muscular, and cold-adapted, with broad chests, strong limbs, large noses, and brains as large as or larger than those of many modern humans, though shaped differently. They make tools, use fire, hunt large animals, gather plants, care for members of their groups, and leave traces of pigments, ornaments, and possible symbolic behavior, scholars still debate the full extent of Neanderthal symbolism and how it compares with Homo sapiens. But the old boundary between human and almost human has become much harder to defend. Farther east, another population remains almost invisible until DNA reveals it. Denisovans are known first not from a skull or skeleton, but from genetic material extracted from small fragments in Denisova Cave in Siberia, a finger bone, teeth, tiny pieces of remains that might once have seemed too modest to change anything, become keys to an entire branch of the human family. Later evidence connects Denisovan ancestry to populations across Asia and Oceania, and a jaw from the Tibetan plateau suggests that Denisovan-related people may have lived at high altitude long before modern humans became established there. Their physical appearance remains uncertain. Their range remains only partly known. Their tools, languages, beliefs, and daily lives are mostly hidden. Yet their DNA survives in living people, especially in some Melanesian, Aboriginal Australian, Papuan, and other populations. And certain Denisovan-derived genes help explain adaptation to high altitude among Tibetans. A vanished people become visible not through monuments, but through inheritance. This is one of the great surprises of modern human origins research. The human past is not a clean replacement story. It is braided. When Homo sapiens expands beyond Africa, especially after roughly 60,000 years ago, in the ancestry of many living non-African populations, these modern humans encounter other human groups already living in Eurasia. They meet Neanderthals. They meet Denisovans or Denisovan-related populations. There may have been other groups whose names are still unknown because their bones have been found, or their DNA has not yet been recovered. Some encounters lead to interbreeding. As a result, most people outside Africa today carry a small percentage of Neanderthal ancestry, while some populations carry Denisovan ancestry as well. The evidence remains incomplete, but the message is clear: extinction did not erase these human relatives completely. Part of them crossed into us. The Ice Age landscapes through which these populations move are vast and varied. Europe holds mammoth steppe, cold grasslands, open woodlands, river corridors, and refuges where forests persist during harsher phases. Siberia becomes a world of extreme cold, but not simply endless ice. Much of it is dry steppe tundra, rich enough in places to support mammoths, horses, bison, woolly rhinoceroses, reindeer, and predators. Southeast Asia, by contrast, includes tropical forests, caves, islands, drowned continental shelves, and shifting coastlines as sea levels rise and fall. Australia, reached by modern humans tens of thousands of years ago, presents deserts, grasslands, monsoon regions, coasts, and ancient ecological systems unlike those of Eurasia. The Ice Age is not one environment. It is a planet of contrasts tied together by climate. Homo sapiens becomes especially successful not because the species is physically strongest in every setting, but because it carries culture in an unusually cumulative way. Tools become varied and regionally distinct. Stone blades, bone points, needles, ornaments, pigments, grinding stones, fishing gear, composite weapons, tailored clothing, and symbolic objects appear in different places and times. Not every group uses the same toolkit, and the record is strongly shaped by preservation. Wood, fibre, hide, feathers, and plant materials usually vanish, meaning much of ancient technology is missing. What survives in the record suggests that Ice Age people are solving problems with materials that archaeology only rarely allows us to see. A stone point may be all that remains of a weapon that also included wood, sinew, resin, feathers. knowledge of animal movement, and hours of learned skill. Art and symbolic behaviour add another layer, though they must be handled with caution. Cave paintings, engraved bones, carved figurines, beads, ochre hues, hand stencils, and decorated tools appear across parts of the late Pleistocene world. Some images are breathtaking horses, bison, lions, rhinos, mammoths, signs, dots, human animal forms, and handprints preserved in darkness. These are not simple illustrations of daily life. They may relate to memory, teaching, ritual, identity, storytelling, landscape, hunting, social ties, or ways of thinking that cannot be translated cleanly. No single explanation fully accounts for Ice Age art. The temptation to treat every image as magic, religion, or hunting practice is too easy. What can be said is quieter and stronger. These people are not merely surviving cold. They are making meaning inside it. The presence of children in such worlds should be imagined carefully and protectively. Families and groups include the young, as all human communities do, but the archaeological story does not need to dwell on danger to them. It is enough to understand that knowledge passes across generations: how to recognize stone, how to track animals, how to prepare food, how to move with seasons, how to return to safe places, how to use fire, how to remember the shape of a valley after snow has covered it. Human survival depends on care as much as courage. The Ice Age is often painted as a world of spears and beasts, but no group endures for long on hunting alone. It endures through sharing, teaching, attention, patience, and social bonds. The disappearance of Neanderthals and Denisovans remains one of the great unresolved problems of human history. Neanderthals vanish as a distinct population roughly around 40,000 years ago, though exact timing varies by region and evidence. Denisovans disappear even more obscurely, because their fossil record is so thin. Climate instability may have stressed small populations. Competition with Homo sapiens may have mattered. Differences in social networks, technology, population size, mobility, disease exposure, or access to resources may have contributed. Interbreeding may have absorbed some groups into expanding modern human populations. No single explanation fully accounts for their disappearance. It was likely a process, not a single event, and it may have differed from place to place. By the end of the last Ice Age, Homo sapiens is the only surviving human species, but that survival carries traces of the vanished. Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA remain in living genomes. Ancient roots lie drowned beneath continental shelves. Caves hold pigments, tools, hearths, bones, and sediments full of microscopic clues. The great animals of the Pleistocene begin to decline in many regions as climate shifts and human pressures interact. Another complex story with no simple global answer. Ice retreats, seas rise, coastlines disappear. The world warms into the Holocene, and human communities begin reshaping landscapes more intensely through burning, hunting, gathering, cultivation, settlement, and eventually agriculture. Yet beneath that newer story remains the older Ice Age truth: humanity did not rise alone. It walked through a world of other humans, borrowed from them, outlasted them, and still carries their shadows in the blood. The Holocene begins not with the trumpet of arrival, but with melting. Ice sheets retreat from their great late Pleistocene reach. Sea levels climb, coastlines move inland, and the continental shelves that once held rivers, camps, marshes, and migration paths sink beneath shallow seas. The world has not become stable, but it becomes stable enough in many regions for a new kind of human life to unfold. Seasons remain, droughts come and go, storms reshape coasts, volcanoes erupt, rivers flood, and earthquakes split ground as they always have. Yet compared with the sharper swings of the last glacial cycle, the early and middle Holocene offer many human communities a climate window wide enough for experiments in settlement, cultivation, herding, storage, and eventually cities. Earth's 4.5-billion-year story now narrows strangely into fields, hearths, irrigation channels, walls, boats, roads, and written marks scratched into clay, bone, stone, bark, and paper. Agriculture does not appear in one place as a single invention. It emerges in different regions, at different times, with different plants and animals, and often after long periods of management, tending, gathering, burning, transplanting, and selective use that do not fit neatly into the word farming. In the Fertile Crescent, wheat, barley, lentils, sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs become part of new village economies. In China, rice and millet follow their own pathways. In New Guinea, people manage tubers and landscapes in wet highlands. In Mesoamerica, maize begins as a transformed grass with a long and intricate history. In the Andes, potatoes, quinoa, llamas, and alpacas become central. In Africa, sorghum, millet, yams, cattle, and other species are woven into local worlds. The evidence remains incomplete in many regions because early cultivation can leave faint traces, but the larger pattern is clear. Humans begin entering the carbon cycle, water cycle, soil system, and evolutionary future of other species with growing intensity. At first, this transformation is small when measured against deep time. A field is nothing beside a supercontinent. A village is nothing beside a basalt flood province. A herd is nothing beside an ocean full of plankton. Yet scale changes through repetition. Forests are cleared, wetlands are drained or managed. Fires are set deliberately to open habitats, improve hunting grounds, encourage certain plants, or maintain travel corridors. Soils are enriched in some places and exhausted in others. Irrigation brings water to fields and salt to the surface. Terraces climb hillsides. Rice paddies release methane. Herds graze grasslands and reshape vegetation. Humans are still biological organisms, but culture gives them a geological reach. They move matter, species, water, and energy in ways no ape before them could. Cities deepen the change. They concentrate people, food, waste, labour, memory, disease, skill, inequality, ritual, and power. Mudbrick, timber, stone, lime, metal, and later concrete become part of landscapes. Rivers are redirected, harbours built, mines opened, forests cut for fuel and ships, ores smelted, fields taxed, grain stored, roads extended. Civilizations rise in river valleys, highlands, islands, deserts, monsoon zones, forests, and coasts, each dependent on climate and geology in ways they may only partly understand. The Nile flood, the monsoon, the loess soil, the volcanic terrace, the copper seam, the tin root, the safe harbour, the mountain pass. The alluvial plain human history grows from Earth history. Every empire is also a mineral, water, soil, and climate story. But the planet continues to remind humans that control is partial. Droughts strain kingdoms, volcanic eruptions dim skies, earthquakes topple walls, tsunamis erase coasts, rivers change channels, crops fail. Floods bury fields under silt or tear them away. Epidemics move along roads and trade networks, exploiting the same connections that carry goods and ideas. Scholars still debate the role of climate in many ancient collapses, because no single explanation fully accounts for the fall of a society. Political choices, war, inequality, trade disruption, disease, migration, environmental stress, and chance all interact. Yet the deep pattern is familiar from older Earth history. Systems become vulnerable when many pressures align. Collapse is rarely one cause. It is usually a network breaking. Then, very late in the story, humans begin burning ancient sunlight at a scale the planet has never seen from one species. Coal formed from carboniferous forests, oil and gas from ancient marine and terrestrial organic matter become fuels for industry. Carbon buried over millions of years returns to the atmosphere in centuries. Machines multiply the reach of muscle. Cities grow into megacities. Nitrogen is fixed industrially for fertilizer, changing agriculture and rivers. Plastic, concrete, aluminum, soot, radionuclides, pesticides, and synthetic chemicals spread into sediments, ice, organisms, and oceans. The modern world feels new because it is new to human memory. To Earth, it is a sudden chemical signal. The atmosphere records it. Carbon dioxide rises, methane and nitrous oxide rise. The oceans absorb heat and carbon, warming and acidifying. Glaciers retreat in many regions. Ice sheets lose mass. Sea level rises again, not from the slow natural thaw out of the last ice age alone, but now with human forcing layered onto the system. Heat waves intensify. Rainfall patterns shift. Some ecosystems move toward poles or higher elevations where they can. Others are trapped by farms, roads, cities, mountains, or coastlines. Coral reefs bleach under heat stress. Permafrost thaws, releasing carbon and disturbing ground that has held frozen memory for thousands of years. The evidence is strong that human activity is now a major force in the Earth system, even though the Anthropocene has not been formally accepted as an official epoch in the geological timescale. The name remains debated as a formal unit, but the signal is not imaginary. Extinction also returns as a human-shadowed process. Earth has always had extinction. Most species that ever lived are gone. The Big Five mass extinctions show that life can be devastated by climate shifts, volcanism, ocean anoxia, impacts, and cascading ecological failure. But the current biodiversity crisis is different in its cause and speed. Habitat destruction, overexploitation, invasive species, pollution, climate change, and disease interact across continents and oceans. Some species vanish before they are described, others survive only in fragments of former ranges. Large animals decline in many places because they need space, slow reproduction, or stable food webs. Small organisms, fungi, insects, plankton, soil microbes, and parasites are harder to see but no less important. What survives in the record of the future may not capture the full texture of what is being lost now. And yet Earth is not only a story of loss. It is also a story of survival beyond expectation. Microbes endure in deep rock and boiling vents. Plants return to lava flows. Forests regrow after fire when given time and seed. Whales recover in some waters after hunting declines. Birds nest in cities. Moss grows on concrete. Fungi thread through poisoned ground. Corals, though deeply threatened, contain lineages and symbioses that researchers still struggle to understand fully. Life is vulnerable, but it is not passive. It responds, shifts, mutates, migrates, adapts, and sometimes surprises. The danger is not that Earth will become lifeless easily. The danger is that the living arrangements humans depend on can unravel, while life in some other form continues without them. This is perhaps the hardest truth of the full 4.5-billion-year story. Earth does not need to remain comfortable for humans in order to remain Earth. It has been molten, frozen, oxygen poor, oxygen poisoned, greenhouse hot, cratered, flooded, and emptied by extinction. It has recovered from disasters far beyond anything human civilization has experienced. But recovery in deep time is not comfort in human time. After the Great Dying, ecosystems took millions of years to rebuild. After the asteroid, the world did not restore the dinosaurs, it made a different future. If modern systems are pushed too far, the planet will not promise to return coastlines, reefs, ice, forests, soils, or species within the span of human memory. Earth remembers slowly, and it heals in languages measured by sediment. The rocks beneath every footstep contain that memory. Zircons remember early water. Banded iron formations remember oxygen's first struggle. Glacial deposits remember Snowball Earth. Ediacaran impressions remember soft bodies that vanished. Cambrian shales remember the first great animal experiments. Coal remembers swamp forests. Boundary clays remember an asteroid. Ice cores remember ancient air. Genomes remember vanished human relatives. Even the modern atmosphere remembers smokestacks. Engines, fields, cattle, fires, and forests cut or regrown. The living planet is an archive, but not a gentle one. It preserves fragments and destroys the rest. By the present moment, the story has come full circle in a strange way. The same forces that shaped Earth from the beginning are still here: fire, ice, water, air, rock, chemistry, sunlight, life, and chance. But now one species can understand enough of the archive to know that its actions matter. Humans are late, fragile, clever, and dangerous. They're made of ancient cells, breathing oxygen created by microbes, eating food rooted in soil made by fungi and plants, living on continents moved by mantle heat, and changing a climate system older than their species. Earth's history does not place humans outside nature as observers. It places them inside the machinery, as both inheritance and force. The planet that began in fire now carries cities glowing at night. The oceans that formed under alien skies now hold ships, cables, warming currents, plastic fragments, whales, plankton, and memories of vanished reefs. The ice that once reached toward the equator now retreats from mountains and poles. Life that began as microscopic chemistry now looks back through telescopes, microscopes, satellites, fossils, and genes, trying to understand the path from molten rock to thought. The evidence remains incomplete, as it always has, but the direction of the story is clear enough. Earth has never been still. It is still becoming, and every layer being laid down now will become part of what the future, if it has readers, will try to understand. And so the story widens again, away from the noise of cities, away from the thin, bright line of human memory, back into the slow dark where Earth keeps most of its past. A planet begins in fire, but it does not remain fire. It cools, cracks, gathers water, loses worlds of stone to impact, raises a moon from violence, and waits beneath a young sun. Its first oceans hold no voices. Its first life leaves almost nothing that can be seen. For ages beyond ordinary feeling, the most important events happen in silence. A cell divides, a molecule is copied, a microbe releases oxygen, iron falls through ancient seas as rust-coloured sediment, and the sky begins to change. Then ice comes, then thaw, then bodies, then forests, then extinction, again and again. Earth seems to approach an ending, and again, it does not return to what it was, it becomes something else. The old worlds do not stand behind us like abandoned rooms still intact. They are broken, buried, transformed, and carried forward in pieces. The Hadean is gone, but its heat remains inside the planet. The Archean seas are gone, but their microbial descendants still breathe through modern chemistry. The Carboniferous forests are gone, but their buried sunlight helped build the modern age. The dinosaurs are gone, except they are not entirely gone, because birds still cross the sky with feathers inherited from that vanished dynasty. Human beings arrive almost at the end of the known story, late enough to mistake the present for permanence. But nothing in Earth's history supports that comfort. Continents move, seas rise, atmospheres change, ice advances and withdraws, species flourish until the conditions that made them possible are altered or removed. What seems solid is often only slow. What seems eternal is often only longer than a human life. Yet there is a kind of calm in that truth. To know deep time is not only to feel small, it is to belong to a vast continuity of matter, chance, survival, and memory. Every breath touches an ancient microbial revolution. Every bone carries minerals from old oceans. Every landscape is a temporary expression of forces still working beneath it. Earth is not finished. It is still turning, still weathering, still burying, still remembering in layers of mud, ice, ash, and stone. And somewhere far ahead, beyond the reach of any voice now speaking, the planet will keep changing, the tides will move, the rocks will fold, the oceans will write and erase their shores, life, in whatever forms endure, will continue its long negotiation with fire, water, air, and time. The final image is not an ending, but a quiet Earth beneath the stars, carrying all its vanished worlds inside it, still becoming, still alive.